Okay, I think everybody's here. I think you're good to go.
We on?
Yep.
Good evening, folks, and welcome to the June 23rd, 2020 virtual Zoom TV meeting of the Cohasset Board of Selectmen. Tonight's meeting will be conducted on the Zoom platform as we have for the last couple of months and live streamed on Cohasset 143 TV and on Cohasset's Facebook page. The public is also invited to participate on the Zoom platform, which can be accessed through the link provided at the top of the posted agenda for tonight's meeting. The Zoom app can be loaded onto a smartphone, laptop, tablet, or other computer. Members of the board and other scheduled participants will be able to participate when called on by the chair. Board members will be able to ask questions of any participant. All votes taken at this meeting will be by roll call. Members of the public who wish to ask questions are asked to utilize the question and answer feature on Zoom, including typing in their name and address for the public. Please make sure if you're going to ask a question, we emphasize that we need to have your name and address, otherwise it may well not get asked. However, that said, we very much welcome questions and citizen participation, so we hope you do so. The chair will review the questions and direct them to the appropriate participant for a response. This meeting is being recorded and will be available for later viewing on Cohasset 143 TV. With that said, I'd like to call the meeting to order with a roll call. Diane?
Diane Kennedy here.
Paul Schubert here.
Terry Thompson here.
Jack?
Jack Creighton here.
Kevin McCarthy here. Next, what we'd like to do is invite all those who wish to participate to join us in a Pledge of Allegiance. You can use the flag in my background if you wish. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, everybody. With that, we'll begin the meeting by seeing if there are any public comments, and I'm going to check my question and answers. I'm not seeing any public comments, questions, or anything of us, so we will move along from that. And first item on the agenda is the update that we have been doing from public emergency. We have Fire Chief Robert Sylvia, Police Chief William Quigley, the Emergency Management Head Glenn Pratt, Health Agent Pam Fahey, and tonight we have Recreation Director Ted Carroll. So I want to welcome all of our town executives and leaders here for the emergency update, which has been widely viewed by the population, by the citizens. So with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Chief Robert Sylvia. Good evening, Bob.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again for this opportunity to do the update. It's been a busy week. Chris, I think Pam sent you along a PowerPoint. Did you see that?
Give me a moment.
No problem.
I don't have a PowerPoint, Chief.
I'll resend it right now. Sorry about that.
All right.
In the meantime, as we're waiting for that to come in,
if you want to show it, Pam, I can just give you the thought. I could just have you. You could just share your screen and you could show it if it's easier. Is it easier? All right, go ahead, Chief.
As I was going to say, it's been a busy week since, it's been a busy time since the last time we talked, and obviously, as of last week, the governor announced Phase 2, Part 2, which began yesterday. So Pam is, as soon as we get this PowerPoint up, Pam is going to do a quick review in regards to exactly where we stood on Phase 2, Part 1, and where we stand on Phase 2, Part 2. The good news is that with the vote of the board last week or last week, we were able to get 3 restaurants up and running in their parking lots. So that was a major coup, and thank you to and Pam, I'm sure will weigh on this also, but thank you to the DPW for all of their hard work on that. The Jersey barriers that we were able to loan to them were buried in the underbrush up to the DPW. Had been there for quite a while, and they dragged them all out, cleaned them all up, did the best they could, and with our help, with the town's help, Mr. Dooley's and Wen's Kitchen were both able to get up and running this week. So that was a major good point for everybody, and I think we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. I'm looking at Pam, seeing if Pam's got this.
It's not letting me share the screen. It says the host disabled it. So I
I
just.
don't know. I know.
Oh,
I just.
okay.
I thought you were sending to me, so that you now have the authority to share it. Pam, go right ahead.
Okay.
So there we go. So as I started to say, the reopening Massachusetts Phase 2, Part 2, as of yesterday, and the guidance for the businesses that were allowed to, and the business sectors that were allowed to start as of yesterday. So you can go to the next slide, Pam. So again, we mentioned this last week. All of these started with the executive order that was dated June 6th, which gave us the Phase 2 pieces. And for anybody, and the only reason we keep this slide here is for anybody that's interested in exactly what is going on with the phasing and the reopening of businesses, we aim them at this one website, which is obviously the governor's website, the reopening sector specific protocols. And not only does it show exactly what's open now and the guidance for those, but it kind of shows you what Phase 3 and Phase 4 might look like. And of course, they haven't shown their cards at all on when Phase 3 might happen, and I think Pam may speak to that. So with the next slide, I'll kick it over to Pam.
Okay, thanks. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, just checking. All right, so I'm just going to start off and do a quick recap of last time. So they broke Phase 2 into 2 steps, Step 1 and Step 2. Step 1 was June 8th, and at that point, they opened up retail stores with occupancy limits. Restaurants, they opened up to outdoor table service. Now, even though technically that started June 8th, it still took a little while to get everybody up and approved and open. And as Chief Sylvia mentioned, we did end up getting Atlantica open, Nguyen's and Mr. Dooley's. Other restaurants in town didn't have to go through this because they were already permitted. They're permitted every year, and that's Via Bistro, Old Salt House, and the Cohasset Country Club. So also hotels, motels, and inns. Some youth sports, but really no contact, so it's pretty much just limited to drills. Personal services just meant things like photography, window washers, individual tutoring. Driving and flight schools were opened. Funeral homes that could go up to 40% occupancy. Some post-secondary higher education, like at Votex, so that kids could graduate. Day camps with lots and lots of restrictions. Outdoor pools and playgrounds, and public libraries that are still on just pickup and delivery. And then in terms of healthcare, now you could go to some doctor's visits, dental visits, and vision care, but the state still would prefer people do telehealth if they can still do that with their doctors. And that hasn't changed. Because now we're in Phase 2, Step 2, that just started yesterday. So even though they allowed now indoor table service at restaurants, it's still not back to the way it was before. It's still going to be tables 6 feet apart, restrictions of like no more than 6 people at a table. And we were with it on a call today with DPH, and they still emphasize they would really prefer people eat outside if possible. They'd like to do as limited indoor dining as people can get away with. It's probably really weather dependent more than anything. Obviously, if it's pouring, you have to start really letting people inside. So for retail, that changed a little bit. And before, under phase 2, step 1, you couldn't go into the dressing rooms. Now, starting yesterday, you can go in by an appointment. And then these other close contact personal services opened up. And of course, they do have restrictions. Hair removal and replacement, nail salons, skin care, massage therapy, makeup salons, makeup application services, and tanning and tattoo salons, and personal training. So gyms themselves are still going to be phase 3, but there can now be personal trainers inside. And the restriction is it's supposed to be either one-on-one, a personal trainer and one client, or they can have 2 clients if they're members of the same family. So the recreation area is probably still the most restricted area under phase 2. And Chief Sylvia is going to talk more about recreation.
Thank you, Pam. So again, we kind of went through this last week, and one of the things we talked about last week was the fact that there would be specific guidelines and there would be signage placed at all of the play parks, the outdoor fields, and everything else. And Glenn's been working on that. So I kind of want to kick it over to Glenn and let Glenn give you an update on exactly what we've done for signage at all of the outdoor venues.
Good evening. Thank you, Chief. So all of the outside recreation areas, at Little League fields, tennis courts, basketball courts, Beechwood Ballpark, Milliken Field, Sandy Beach, Bassings Beach, all those outdoor areas have been signed. There are 56 signs that have been put up around all the different venues, listing the state required regulations and usages. Each of the play parks and ballparks, recreation areas in town have had a hand sanitizer dispenser mounted. We don't know what the life expectancy of them is outside, but they're there for the public to use. So we think that we have made it everybody well aware of what's expected of them when they're using these parks. Ted will talk a little bit more about how his recreation staff is keeping the play parks for the smaller kiddos clean. So we think we're in good shape here, and it's a big step forward.
Thank you, Glenn. So again, Glenn just mentioned, so the safety standard for playgrounds, we mentioned this again last week, that all of the big, bullet points that we've talked about to try and maintain the 6 feet from all other persons and face coverings when you can't, right down to cleaning and using hand sanitizers. Glenn took care of that piece, and then Ted kind of picked up the ball about how are we going to keep the play parks clean. So Ted, you want to give us a little briefing on exactly what we're doing on that front?
Sorry about that. I mute myself. So I do have staff working 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day, 7 days a week, hitting all 4 playgrounds and the red tables downtown. So they do start here and they go from Sawyer Street up to Deer Hill and Osgood, down to the red tables downtown, then over to Beechwood. So I do have 2 members of my staff every day, for 6-hour shifts, and they're wiping everything down and just keeping an eye on everything, picking up any loose trash. And we did socially distance the swings, so all the swings in town have a 6-foot gap with each other. And today we actually had this playground here was landscaped. All the poison ivy, all the black locust was removed. So it's looking beautiful here. And then all the rest of the playgrounds are in great shape too.
Kudos to Ted and his staff. As I said, we probably have the cleanest playgrounds in Massachusetts. They are absolutely sparkling. They do a great job with it. The kids have taken some serious pride in the work that they're doing. And as Ted also mentioned, and we'll cover that in a minute, but they're also cleaning the tables that we put down at the Common. So that's a good thing as far as things go. Pam, could you throw that last slide back up real quick, the outdoor sports guidance, because I just want to touch on that very quickly again. Okay, so we touched on this last week. The only change was that the group size that was 10 has now been expanded to 12 participants, including coaches and staff. We've been working with, obviously, the youth baseball and softball folks. Pam and I met with the lacrosse, youth lacrosse folks this week, or last week, excuse me. And everybody's taken a hard look at this. The big thing and what I really wanted to mention is that there's no games, scrimmages, or tournaments are permitted at this time. So contact sports still are limited to no contact drills and practices. And we just need to keep reminding folks of that because, you know, again, everybody's up using the fields, doing whatever. We want them to do it as safely as possible. And, you know, again, it's about education and the signage that we put up to try and keep everybody headed in that direction. So I'm good with that, Pam. So if you want to take the next item, it's all yours.
So it's a little bit different topic. It's the topic of does the Board of Health have a recommendation to ban ice cream trucks from Sandy Beach this year? And that was brought up because the town of Hull decided that they felt like they couldn't do it safely. It would be almost like a nuisance with kids crowding around an ice cream truck. So at the chairman's recommendation last week, I did reach out to Hingham and to Situate to find out what they were doing. And they are going to continue allowing ice cream trucks at beaches. And we had a Board of Health meeting last night, and the boards talked about it. And they decided to recommend that the Board of Selectmen go ahead and approve the transient licenses to give them a chance. And then if it looks like they're not being able to socially distance properly, then kind of reconsider it and, you know, kind of go through the escalation of steps, whether it, you know, starts off with warnings and education and that type of thing. So bottom line is the Board of Health does recommend that the selectmen issue the transient license this year to the ice cream trucks.
So is that something we want to take up right now then? That would be convenient for you? We don't,
So
we had those licenses. Go ahead, Chris.
no, we won't have we don't have any of the licenses. So the first question for
Right.
selectmen now is if you're going to entertain them, then next week you'll have the license. That those who are interested in applying will be in front of the board next Tuesday.
So why don't we cover that now then, Chris, just as good. How does the board feel about entertaining, you know, and considering the application for ice cream trucks, something that the board would decide at the next meeting? Any views, comments about that? Paul Schubert, 1 second, Paul. Get you, go ahead, Paul.
I think this is reasonable. It really is going to be whether the line up to the ice cream truck is going to be able to be distanced. In itself, you've got a contained environment where the person is dispensing it. So it's not like there's a group of kids inside a room. It's going to be the line outside. I think that's reasonably done. It's almost like going to JJ's, and JJ's is more physical. And I think it'd be reasonable.
Okay. Jack Creighton.
I just think
go
we
ahead.
should, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. No, I'd be in favor of issuing temporary licenses and bringing it up before the board meeting. I think if we do it next week, we clearly can't do it tonight. Next week, if any questions come up, we will have a time, a week to review it. But conditionally, I'm completely in favor of it.
Okay. Any other commentary? Carrie?
I think it would be a really sad world to not be able to have ice cream at the beach this summer after what we've been through the past few months. So 100%, I think we need to get that taken care of next week.
Okay. Okay, any other commentary?
Diane, I don't know if you can see me.
No, I can't see you, Diane, but go ahead,
Oh,
Diane.
Sorry about that. No, I agree. I think one of the questions is, you know, whether we can do a conditional license for the transient vendors and what kind of enforcement might the Board of Health be looking for doing. So if we give these, what's the trigger point at which it's not working, and what kind of a license should we be giving if there's a chance that we might be, finding it's not working out and wanting to stop the transient vendors. So it's just some of the mechanics of, I agree with going forward to it, but like, again, what are we doing? Would we be issuing temporary, transient, monthly, or what are our options for that?
Thank you, Diane.
And there may not be an
I'm
answer
also-
now, yeah.
Right. I'm also in favor of it. It might be helpful at the next meeting when it's presented, if there could be a rough diagram maybe of what a truck would look, and then what the line would look like. That might help make people feel a little better, that there'd be some kind of roped line, and just a very rough thing. I think that would help the board make its decision.
Yes.
So what I'm hearing, I don't think we need to take a vote on it. I'd say we will. The board is quite willing to consider it, so it'll be on the agenda for next week's meeting. And Tracy, make sure this is on the first draft, if you would, please, for the meeting of the 30th. Okay? Thank you, Pam, for that follow-up.
Mr. Chairman, at this point, we figured we'd just pause very quickly and see if the board had any questions on either Phase 2 Part 1 or Phase 2 Part 2 before we get on to a couple of other items we just wanted to let you know about.
You probably won't be able to, this is broader than the state, I guess, but one thing that I've seen that sort of concerns me is watching the national news is, I made a purpose intention to watch it too, that these states, several of them that opened early, I remember talking with other people, well, let's wait and see what happens in a few weeks. And lo and behold, in a number of these states, they're increasing quite a bit in the number of infections and so forth. Enough so that it's almost fair to say that half of the United States is now on an increasing incline. And I know it's beyond really you folks' what you cover here in town, but do you have any view, or is there any concern, or are we laying any contingencies for if this gets out of control in some states, which apparently it's approaching according to the authoritative news, as to the impact of protecting Cohasset, the implications of that for Cohasset? And I know you didn't expect that question.
No,
This is an
it's
NBC,
quite all right, Mr. Chairman. It's obviously something we talk about on a regular basis. And I'll let Pam talk about, in fact, the whole idea behind the phasing was just that they would take a pause between each phase and take a look at the metrics to see exactly what might be going on. And I know Pam was on a DPH call today, because obviously we're at the end of Phase 2, and Phase 3 was tentatively, the virus is going to dictate the calendar, but the calendar said that in a few weeks we'd be at Phase 3. So I know they were talking about it today, and Pam might be able to give you an update on where things are progressing.
That's right. So they do base it on metrics. And right now they announced today that they don't have a date for Phase 3. They were saying there was going to be 3 weeks between phases, but nobody saw them breaking Phase 2 into 2 steps. So it kind of became unclear, was it going to be 3 weeks from Phase 2 Step 1, or is it now 3 weeks from Step 2 that just started? And I'm kind of thinking it's probably from Step 2, because they announced today that they don't have a date yet for Phase 3. But they're definitely looking at the metrics all the time, and Massachusetts is really trending in the right way. One of the metrics they talked about today was the percent of people that come up positive from the tests, and the tests have increased a lot. And during the worst of it, I know we were up over 10% of the number of people that tested positive of the number of people that completely tested. So they just put out an announcement on June 17th and 18th of last week, because of the demonstrations that have happened, that they had a big push for anybody that had taken part in the demonstrations to come and get a free test. So on a normal average day in Massachusetts, they test about 10,000 people. And our rate of positive tests is around 2%, right? So that's way down from like greater than 10% we were when, like in April, when things were really flaring. So they had 15 to 17,000 people that came to get tested last week, that had been to demonstrations, and their rate of positive tests was still low at 2 to 3%, which is consistent with the statewide average at what they've been seeing on a daily basis. So they were really heartened by that. They felt like there was some good news, like they've really kind of dodged a bullet there. So fortunately, we're trending low, we're staying low. So as long as we keep staying like that, they're going to keep opening things up gradually.
Good. Just before I get to Paul, I see a hand up. I think it's a Tim D. But Tim, if you can hear me, if you have a question, you write it down on the question and answer. And I'm more than glad to read your question, Tim. So if you do that, or I don't know whether your hand is up for another reason or not, just to say you're here. But so, okay, staying that, Paul Schubert.
So it's similar to the testing that was done in Minneapolis after the protest there as well, that the overall positive rate of testing with those that were demonstrators was roughly just barely above the state level of Minneapolis at that time. So it looks like, honestly, probably being outside is a little bit safer. I think if you're in an enclosed area, that's where I suspect a lot of the places that have opened up quickly, like Florida, Texas, Austin, Dallas, Arizona, California, Orange County, parts of Oregon are going to see, I would not want to be in an ICU in Arizona. So I think that gradual slow opening has worked, and just remind people to wear the mask and be very careful.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. There is a question, and it is, I'll take the one from the public here, Tim Davis, Cohasset, and his question is, what is the protocol for dealing with the Situate portion of Cohasset Harbor, including the channel, sand spit, and Bassing Beach? Anybody want to tackle that question? I can read it again if you want.
Mr.
Probably
Chairman?
the harbor master would probably is not here.
Yeah, I think Chief Quigley can probably tackle it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, good evening, members of the board.
Good evening. Good evening, Bill.
So we've partnered up with the harbor master this summer, and we do have there are provisions in the law that we do have jurisdiction, and it talks about a certain number of rods over the town line and county line. So we do, we've had longstanding jurisdiction in waterways and at Bassing's Beach and in the channel and places like that. We've been out there. We're in close touch with the patrol boats in Situate, and Laurie's been a great partner with us. So we're just providing a little backup for her because it's so busy out there. It's just been a madhouse out there the last probably 5 or 6 days, and we send 2 officers out with her to sort of backstop her. We've been doing a ton of education, and we've helped Laurie escort several boats back to the dock. And we've found that a lot of boats don't have proper number of life jackets, expired flares, no fire extinguishers, things like that. So we're doing a ton of education right now, and just Laurie's been a great partner with us. We're just trying to manage the situation because it is really busy, but we are in close touch with Situate, and we're just sort of working through this now.
Thank you very much, Chief. Okay, anything else? There's no other questions, and Chief Sylvia, you have the microphone.
Okay, yes, Mr. Chairman, we brought Ted along with us tonight because there were some questions the last time we met in regards to what might be going on with recreation. And now that we're through phase 2 and somewhere down the road, we might get to phase 3. Ted wanted to give you a bit of an update on the summer recreation program and where things are. So we'll kick it over to Ted.
Welcome, Ted.
Thanks. As Pam mentioned earlier, there are lots of restrictions in phase 2. So we have some plans in place, but with the no shared equipment and no games, it does provide some obstacles for us. So we've sort of have a schedule in place that I presented to Pam and Mary to look at, and the safety protocols. But, for ideally, phase 3 is better for us because you can just, a little more enjoyable for the children to have, actually play games with each other. But, we're working on both aspects, phase 2 and phase 3. And, hopefully phase 3 will come quicker so we can do more with the kids, sharing equipment, playing Frisbee, playing cornhole without having individual equipment for every child. But, we're working on both angles. We would like to try to do something after the 4th for a couple, for a couple 6-week, 6-week sessions. But, right now we're just sort of double checking our protocols, our safety protocols, and developing more plans, getting the medical team in place. And then, actually, looking forward to phase 3 also, where we can open up to some more activities.
Okay. Any questions from the board on the recreation report? Good, and I don't see any from the question and answer, so thank you very much for that update, Ted.
Okay, thanks.
Chief Sylvia, you move.
The next thing we had, Mr. Chairman, was an update on Sandy Beach. Glenn's been working very, very closely with the Sandy Beach Association, so he may have an update for you also.
Mr. Chairman, so we've worked out an arrangement this year where the Sandy Beach Association is fully responsible for the control of and opening and closing of the parking lot on the set hours, which are 6 to 9 p.m. Every day. But they are being sure that no vehicles come in without the proper permits. And they're also taking account of the occupants in the vehicles when they come. And they're using that to compare against the social distancing requirements for high tide, especially. Low tide, you can socially distance almost 1,600 people in that square area, but it's only, it's a shade under 600 at high tide. So they're watching that very closely, which is an interesting project. And I think that we'll have some very good data at the end of the summer on exactly what goes on down there. And I think that Chief Quigley might say that his officers are finding less violators. And so we think it's working out terrifically. The place is signed very well. And I think it's going to be a successful summer.
Good. And I must say, going by there, it seems very visibly staffed, and you get that sense going by there that it's well ordered, and there are staff people who are identifiable, and there seems to be a good number of them too. So you do get that sense.
They have a valet stand set up out front, so it's like going into any other municipal parking lot. The control you might see. So far, so good.
Good. Any questions from the board, Glenn? And nothing I see from the public. So thank you very much, Glenn.
Chief Quigley, I think, has something for you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, Chief. I don't see you on my, so I can't see your hand up. Chief Quigley.
I'm like a ninja.
Yeah.
So we gave the, I had a meeting this morning right after our morning call at Sandy Beach, and we had the orientation for all of the lifeguards and employees down there this morning. So there's a great group. They've all returned from last year, so they sort of know the drill. They have a nice setup with the gate attendant, and there's really just a good crew. They get good emergency procedures in place, and things have really fallen into place there. And it's they have an excellent employee and procedure manual as well that they've come up with this year. So I have a lot of confidence in. We're also Glenn was also good enough to provide them with the radio from emergency management. So they have a couple radios down there where they can have direct contact with the police station in the cruisers.
Good. Any questions of anybody for Chief Quigley on it? No, I don't see any. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chief. Chief Sylvia.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the next item we had on our little list of things to do an update was, we'll call it the Common Cafe. And actually, I didn't really have my fingers in this at all. This was all about Glenn and Ted. So we're going to kind of let them fill you in on exactly how that came about.
Well, Ted's rec program was a little sidetracked, and he had some great picnic benches at the ready at the Hill School. And after meeting with you folks a couple of weeks ago, talking about opening up outside opportunities for restaurants and places for people to enjoy, we grabbed those picnic tables, brought them down to the common. We set up a sanitizer station, so if people want to wipe the table themselves, there's a way for them to do that. We try to encourage carry in, carry out on your trash, so we put a couple of obscure trash containers over on the side, so they don't, they're not that noticeable, but people do find them and use them. And so I think it's been successful. It looks very well used to me. And Ted has that on his, one of the stops for his folks too.
Good. Hopefully it'll be something that maybe one of those things that comes out of this situation that, you know, becomes permanent. In fact, it seems like those tables are very naturally nested in there, and that's something for the board to consider in the future. But sure, adds a nice touch. It's also good for downtown businesses too, because people can get product and go over there. It just looks good and has a good New Englandy feel to it, and people using the common. So I got to say, it's one of those things that looks like it. You know, we've stumbled upon something that may be a keeper. Diane Kennedy, I see your hand up. Then Carrie.
Yeah, I'm going to throw a little bit of a cold water on it. I've had nothing but great commentary about the tables, and I think it's wonderful. However, I did hear from somebody from the Cohasset Cohasset Common Historic District about whether it should be something that they weigh in on. And I just think, Chris, they may be putting it on an upcoming agenda, at least, you know, that's what I was told, just as an opportunity to weigh in on it. And it may be that they only have jurisdiction over permanent fixtures on the common, but just want to alert you to that.
Well, I'd be happy to take the lead and file whatever paperwork they need to have a hearing set up, and
Right.
We might as well talk it all through. That's a great idea, probably.
And it may just be an outreach to them, Glenn. I don't know that they want to stop progress. I think they just felt like, why didn't we know about it? So.
Okay, I'll work on that.
Great.
Thank you, Diane. Carrie?
I wanted to thank everyone for being able to put this together so quickly. I've gotten so many texts and messages about how much fun people are having, being able to sit outside, enjoy the beauty of the common, enjoy takeout and coffee from our downtown area. So I think it's fantastic. And I do think it could be one of those positive things that come out of this coronavirus, that we could do this in the future. So I think it's great, and people seem to really be enjoying it.
Thank you, Carrie. Jack Creighton?
Yeah, I think I would just echo what Carrie had to say. It's good to see we have some opening up. We have some life on the common. We're coming back to enjoy our Cohasset very special summer. Great idea.
Good. Okay, Paul Schubert.
I agree. I think it's a nice addition to the area down there, which will draw more people to the downtown area and the businesses.
Okay, very good. If I see I have anything else on this, I have a citizen question coming up. Anything more on the tables and chairs? If there isn't, I'll take the citizen question at this time. Chief, this one is from a Dan Delvliger, Cohasset. Question is, you mentioned trash cans on the common. It would be great if we could get a trash can or two near the harbor. I picked up a lot of trash around the old lighthouse and Rock Point this weekend and could not find a trash can to put them in until I got home. That's a idea. Thought? Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the many of the public trash cans were taken in early in the emergency because we were concerned about the virus and spreading and trash being around. So they were consciously taken away, and I suppose we could have a discussion with public health and reconsider which ones should be put back out at this time or at what.
Okay, that sounds like a follow-up to it. So thank you for that.
Mr. Chairman, there's actually guidance on trash cans in outdoor areas. So we'll make sure that that we take a look at the guidance again and put up what exactly, and the guidance very simply is they're looking for open top trash cans, so people don't have to put their hands in them or on them to put their hands into, to put the trash inside. So it's not
Great.
that hard,
Great.
but we'll make sure that we do it right if we do something.
Great, Chief, thank you. Jack Creighton has his hand up again.
Yeah, one of the issues that we learned at Sandy Beach, and the Sandy Beach Association has learned, is that sometimes trash cans create trash. And one of the issues, and I don't know how it's going to play out, but if you have trash cans and people fill them up, and then people take the trash there and they leave it next to it, and then the seagulls get into it. So just a word of caution that sometimes wonderful things can have less than wonderful consequences. I think we ought to check it out, but I think we ought to learn some lessons from Sandy Beach. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Diane Kennedy?
Yeah, just to play off what Jack said, I agree. And I was, as a way of complimenting the down near Black Rock Beach at the bottom of Forest Ave, that park does not have a trash can, and it has had one for the last number of years, and people literally drive by and put their old beach chairs and their extra, and there has been very little trash at Black Rock Beach this year, so people are being more intentional about taking it away. There is a little collection of lost toys that is growing, but it's just something to balance, because a trash can invites trash, and unless you're on it every hour, it can be more problematic. So
Sort of the I build it, they will come strategy. I think there was a movie about that, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That sounds like we've covered this discussion quite thoroughly, and if you take that into your deliberations, I know we'll do the wise and safe thing. Chief Sylvia?
Okay, the last thing I had on the on our agenda for tonight, Mr. Chairman, is we've had conversations with the Second Congregational Church. I don't know if you're aware, but for the past bunch of years, they've had their summer home has been the Cohasset Sailing Club. And unfortunately, due to coronavirus, they're not able to go indoors this year. So what they've asked to do is to be able to set up chairs on Sunday morning in the area right in front of the lighthouse replica, adjacent to the sailing club. Chris, I know I sent that to you. Can you pop that up by any chance? That PDF that came from George? So this is the area that we're talking about, and at the top of the screen, obviously, is the ocean or the harbor. To the right of the screen is the sailing club, and obviously you can see, the memorial behind it. And this is the area that they'd like to use. We've had numerous conversations, or I've had numerous conversations with Pastor Karen, Bailey Francois, and George Baumgartner in regards to this. And if you could just slide down a little bit, Chris, the one thing that, after speaking with the harbor master, the one thing she was worried about was at that time on a Sunday morning, there isn't a lot of traffic at the harbor, but there is a lot of the commercial fishing fleet that works 7 days a week, obviously being weather dependent. So Laurie was just adamant about the fact that as long as they were not going to interfere with the fishing fleet, she didn't see that it was a problem. And as a rule, she tells me that the fishermen park along the side along Mill River, just below her office, and not over on the other side next to the memorial where the handicapped parking space is. So these are the spots. This again was the proposed plan from the Second Congregational Church. This is what they've been doing in the past, and they tell me that it's usually somewhere around 24 cars, and they're there between 9 and 10 on Sundays. They haven't had a problem in the past. The only concern we had was that, you quickly weighed in on this quite a bit, is there's been a lot of additional traffic and people searching for places to go because it's a lot of staycations going on and people are parking in places and riding their bicycles. So the police have had to increase the amount of patrols that they do in regards to parking. So again, conversation with the Second Congregational Church was how many cars don't have Cohasset stickers. And they're feeling it is no more than 4 or 5 that are former Cohasset residents that have moved out of Cohasset are still congregants at the church, and they come. And they proposed, and this is a question for the board, they proposed a parking permit for Sunday morning for basically the same thing we did with the Unitarian Church for the common. That they would have something that they could put on their windshield that was only good, here it is, from 8 to 10:30 in the morning on Sundays from now until September 13th. And if the board allowed them, and again, they're only talking about maybe, I would say less than a half a dozen of these passes would go on cars, and they would all, everybody would be gone by 10:30. So that's what they proposed to us. We, the operations group, as a rule, have no problems with this. I think, I'll let Pam and Chief Quigley or Glenn all weigh in on this if they'd like to, but they seem to have a pretty solid plan. Unfortunately, they've always used the inside of the sailing club and they've never had a problem. This is just going to bring them outside. And again, this is for the board to weigh in on, and this is your call more than ours, but I think we don't have any problem with anything that they proposed so far.
One thing, this does sound interesting. It's the first we've heard of it. The board has. It's one thing I'm thinking before we go too far in this is that this is not on the agenda, and it is a fairly significant item, though. I'm wondering if this shouldn't go on the agenda for the 30th, so that the public can be aware that this request is being made and have a chance to possibly weigh in or not weigh in. I know that area down in Government Island is very busy, every day. But obviously this is the kind of a request I think everybody would look favorable upon, but it not being on the agenda and time for it to be formally presented, it might be wiser if the board was to wait and have this next week on the agenda. And the second thing is that it does cross my mind that there isn't a huge amount of spaces that were designated there. Would be using the commons be something that would be an appropriate alternative, because that's a much bigger space and the spacing could be done, a lot easier. We don't even need to reflect on that tonight, but that's just something that went through my mind as we were hearing about this, because this whole hopeful situation, won't be existent next year and everybody can get back to their normal routines. But at any rate, those are sort of the thoughts I'm having on it. And but because it's not on the agenda and the seriousness, significance of it, I'm thinking this should go, next week. But any other thoughts on this?
I agree.
I agree.
Okay. And I think what we'll do then is we'll put this on the agenda. If everybody's okay, Tracy, next week, put it as an agenda item so the public knows that this is being requested, and then have a presentation of this and the alternatives. And now the board, has a week to think about it, because it's the first time I think any of us have heard on this. So I think that's the way we'll proceed. But first, Jack Creighton, you have a question? Jack.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm a member of Second Congregational Church. I think I would need to recuse myself from this discussion.
Okay, that would be your okay. So
I'd rather err on the side of being
sure, that's not a
cautious
problem.
of such matters.
No problem. Okay, so not hearing anything else, that's the way we'll proceed on that, Chief Sylvia.
Mr. Chairman, that's what we had. I will reach back out to them. I know that they had originally thought that they could go as early as this coming Sunday, so we'll just have to let them know that they need to make plans to come before the board next week. So we'll take care of that for you. Thank you. And that's what we had.
When you communicate, you can understand that we need to post something like that needs to be posted so the public has a chance to weigh in on it. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, yep. Mr. Chairman, understood. We'll take care of that.
Anything else? Anything else?
If that's our presentation for tonight, so unless the board has any further questions, I think we're good.
Okay, and I'm not seeing any questions from the public, so I'd
like to thank you all. Thank you all again for the thorough presentation, and all of our first responders and recreation folks, and Pam Fahey and the health department, police and fire, of course, and emergency management job that Glenn Pratt and his folks, just all of you are doing a great job. Our data and statistics, knock on wood, are much better than a lot of other towns. And I've had town officials from other towns tell me that they look to us with a certain amount of envy, and the way we've conducted ourselves through this whole crisis, not the least a bit as a tribute to what all the presenters tonight and many other people in this town have done. So let's just keep up the good work. But thank you very much for all your efforts. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your public service too, and we appreciate your leadership.
Thank you very much, Chief. Appreciate that. With that said, we're going to go ahead and go to the next item on the agenda, which is a review/vote of applications for the extension of premises for outside seating for food and beverage service. We're talking apparently particularly 5 South Main Street and any others that have come up. So that said, Chris.
So 5 South has not applied, as it turns out. They're still considering what they want to do. So they may come this week with something formal. I think that they're also exploring what to do with this new indoor option. They can do again. They can have indoor seating. So we're hoping to have a more comprehensive, we'll have from them. But we had set it up because they indicated they would submit something, but they chose it at this point not to. So there's nothing. So this item can be passed over. There's nothing new, and you've already got an update on how it's going so far.
Okay, great. So, and I think too, the message from us is when everybody's ready to come with an application, the board's ready to listen to it. We want to help and encourage our businesses to prosper in town. Next item on the agenda then would be the annual personnel review. Town manager Chris Senior. And so, Chris, are you having Miriam guide us through this, or how are we doing this?
I guess Miriam is going to guide us through this.
Miriam, welcome here tonight with us, and look forward to you guiding us through the annual review of Chris Senior.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just as setting the context for this for the public, the process includes each selectman meeting with Chris Senior and reviewing the last fiscal year's, or the one we're ending, his performance in a prescribed manner. There are the goals that were set by the Board of Selectmen, and then there are different competencies and facets of town management that they individually evaluate him on. And my job is to take those 5 evaluations and try to summarize them into one document. And so that's what I will present this evening. Let me just pull that up so I can start with it. So this performance evaluation is for fiscal year 20, which we are just about finished with. And the first part of the evaluation is about performance goals. And the first goal was create a plan to achieve and exceed 10% affordable housing on an ongoing basis and sustainable basis consistent with the character of Cohasset. And as a group, this was ranked complete and in progress. It was not one or the other. It was a mixture of complete and in progress. And some of the comments included, Chris has successfully managed the various tracks, staff and committees who worked on the completion of a housing production plan, the raising and required administrative legal setup of an affordable housing trust, the work of the Affordable Housing Steering Committee, and the coordination and cooperation among these 2 committees and the Community Preservation Committee. At both special town meeting in the fall of 19 and annual town meeting in June of 20, CPA housing money was transferred to the trust, as was 808 Jerusalem Road, a property in the custody of the town treasurer, which is identified site for affordable housing units. So that's the summary of goal 1. Goal 2 is present a final plan for the renovation and restoration of Town Hall to town meeting. And this was assessed as in progress. And the comments that were made can be summarized by saying the pandemic slowed the progress and is now in the process of design drawings and architectural work to bring forward to fall town meeting. This has been slowed but not stopped, and as the town hall committee moved forward, this should be ready for fall 2020. Goal 3, recognizing the public health crisis of addiction and substance abuse, the town will take concrete steps to create and support policies and practices that respond to these issues. And this was assessed as in progress. And to summarize the comments, this comment was made. Although incomplete, excellent progress this year, as this is an ongoing goal. Excellent positive support from the Safe Harbor initiatives, including $7,500 funding for community educational programs for ages below or above those covered by Safe Harbor. Police and health departments have actively developed and implemented programs and policies in support of this goal. Mental health first aid training has been offered to the public, including a published video program. More progress to be made towards a realization of the vision of a teen youth center in Cohasset. The 4th goal, address implementation of the harbor plan, the open space plan, and the master plan, and that was assessed as complete. The master plan is fantastic, and it is impressive that our town was able to get this done. I think we need to continue the course here and make sure the best possible implementation is happening for the benefit of the town. And then the 5th goal, which was the unanticipated emergency response management due to COVID-19 and declaration by the Board of Selectmen of a state of emergency on March 16th. And this was assessed both complete and in progress. And some of the comments that summarize what was said was the response is ongoing, but it has been very effective, particularly excellent coordination between town departments, ongoing and effective communication with the public, obtaining of federal and state funding to address unanticipated COVID-related expenses, conducting an effective town meeting during the crisis, development and enforcement of public health-related practices and policies to limit the spread of the COVID disease. The second part of the performance evaluation talks about basic expectations and competencies of a town manager. And the 3 levels of rating are exceeds expectations, meets expectations, or needs improvement. And the first area was financial management of the town, which includes preparing and managing to the approved budget. And this was assessed as an exceeds expectations. Some of the supporting examples that were given were, I think our town finance and budgeting is very strong and something we should all be proud of. We need to stay the course on this. PEB recommendations were adopted by the board and funding was approved at town meeting. This critical work will serve Cohasset well into the future, and the maintenance of the AAA credit rating. The second area of competency was board and committee management. And this was also a split assessment of exceeds expectations and meets expectations. And some of the supporting examples are cobbling together a town meeting in 6 weeks with a drive-in movie style platform and using teleconferencing to all committees was amazing. Manages contract negotiations with key town officials and labor unions very well. Excellent recruitment and appointments to master plan, recreation and open space plan and town hall committees. Chris is very skilled at mediation and negotiation, and his calm demeanor is very effective during debate and among personalities. His facilitative leadership is strong. The third area is staffing and management of staff. And this was assessed as an exceeds expectation. And some of the supporting examples were excellent hiring. Employees appear well motivated and seem to enjoy working for Chris and the town. He recognizes staff are flexible, adaptive, and can innovate. Chris's facilitation of work from home and emerging pivots on all aspects of municipal government is to be strongly commended. And the fourth area of competency is operational effectiveness. This also received an assessment of exceeds expectations. And some of the supporting examples included improved in the area of using and leveraging technology in an innovative manner, as well as to increase efficiency and drive down costs, such as at the transfer facility, alternative energy initiatives, and the town meeting. Another comment was very simply stated, if there was not a very high level of operational effectiveness in Cohasset town government, there would have been no way for us to navigate as well as we have through the pandemic challenges, shutdowns, and uncertainties. Specifically, we almost immediately got all boards and committees on the Zoom platform and streaming on both our cable TV channel and social media. In the fifth area, customer service, the assessment was exceeds expectations, and supporting examples included excellent availability and communication with both elected officials and citizens. Staff seemed to be aware of and responsive to citizen requests and needs. Overall, effective response to the COVID crisis is a good example of adapting to and responding to town needs. Other examples included facility stickers are now available online, voting cards were available for absentee ballots, water, sewer, police, and fire working at high levels despite ongoing events. The sixth area is planning, organization, and flexibility. And this was also assessed at exceeds expectations. Supporting examples included keeps board advised on major projects and imminent events. Very good job of preparing a balanced budget, meeting all requirements. Chris showed remarkable leadership in adapting to changes daily from the mandates from the state, employee and committee needs, and the community circumstances and issues. The budget process continued with great consideration for completely uncertain new realities. And then the last area, communication, was assessed as exceeds expectations with the following supporting examples: weekly updates and reports, use of the Zoom platform, increasing effective use of 143 TV. Chris's writing is exceptional and effective. I wish he did more of it. His presentation at town meeting was also very effective and focused on communicating the critical information to the residents. And the last part of the performance evaluation before the final comments includes two questions. Basically, what was the best achievement? And by far, the response to that really was coordinating the COVID response, the pivot to executing town functions via telecommunication in the pandemic. And the second subject, which would benefit most from further attention, there were really two, and one was the vision of a 21st century teen youth center realized, and ensuring that committees and boards are optimally functioning. And then the review is ended with general comments, which I believe you, the selectmen, are going to share with the public. Kevin, you're still muted.
Now I'm unmuted. Thank you very much, Miriam. Any comments from the board before we go to the next section of the review? I don't see any, and thank you very much for that review. Jack Creighton has a comment. Jack?
Yeah, it appears that none of my comments made on there. I know we had some problems getting my performance thing and getting it signed, and I never got a signed copy to me from Chris, so I didn't get to sign it to send it back to him. So I didn't see any of my comments. So one of the questions that I have on the overall thing is, you know, Miriam, you selected the comments that you chose, and what is your position?
My position in the town?
Yes.
It's Director of Human Resources and Special Assistant to the Town Manager.
So you're a direct employee of Chris Senior?
I am.
Yes, okay. I thought people should know that. And when I look at all these comments, was there a preponderance of the comments that you actually read from all the selectmen, select board members, a couple or whatever? I just noticed I spent a little time on writing, and the context and the writing style seemed to be remarkably similar. And I was just wondering if they were evenly distributed, or you chose various ones to feature, and if you could just kind of explain that, and not so much to me, but so the town knows how you in your professional thing chose to prepare this.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to. So I received 5 copies of different evaluations. Everyone has their own style. Everyone has their own evaluation. So I did 3 things. First, I took the goals and I then counted how many were complete, how many were in process, and how many weren't started, and got numbers there. In most of them, they were clearly in one bucket, but in some, as I said, if it was just about evenly divided in 2 buckets, that became, you know, completed and in progress. And that's why you heard me say that. The second thing I did was I went to the competencies, and again, I went through the 5 evaluations and I got the scores. For some reason, that was a little bit more consistent among the 5 different evaluations, and so there was less that was at 2 different levels. And then after I put all of that into the summary document, I read all 5 evaluations in their comments for each, for the supporting evidence on each. Some evaluations didn't have any examples, and that made it, you know, it was really down to 4 evaluations as far as supporting examples. If there was a comment that didn't support the majority rating, then I did not add it to the summary document. However, a copy of each evaluation will be part of the town manager's personnel file. But as far as the summary goes, I summarized it based on the assessment first, and then brought out comments to back up that assessment.
So these things that are in his file, but they're not available to the town. They're confidential in his personnel file.
That is correct.
So, you know, I guess my concern is some of my questions, like I pointed out specific examples of in October, a lot of emails and records were requested that might have or might not have reflected upon the performance of the town manager. And I have asked for those and they never received them. And I would think that if you were to do a really good evaluation as an HR professional, that some failure to disclose documents that are in the public realm would at least be mentioned, but there's, you know, no mention of that. And there's also some issues about the, there's several issues on there, and I don't want to go through them, but it seems to me that if you were summarizing your employer's performance, and it all is very wonderful. It sounds wonderful. It's a wonderful, very highly positive thing. But I'm wondering if the town wants to make a decision and that there are things that don't reflect perhaps as favorably as your report, and then they're buried in a confidential file, you know, it's something that's, I think, professionally questionable. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Carrie Thompson, you have a comment?
Just a point of procedure, since this is my first year doing this. Miriam, I'm just wondering, are these results shared with Chris before the meeting tonight? Do you go over them with him, or do we go over our final papers with him after the meeting tonight?
From a procedure perspective, I know that everyone met with Chris to discuss his performance with him personally, and then I got the evaluation forms. So I did not get, I did not review what I summarized with Chris before this meeting.
Okay, that's all I was asking.
Okay, thank you. Any other commentary? Okay, not hearing any. What we'll do is go to the next portion, which is the final portion of the annual review, is each of us have a sort of a verbal write-up that we have done, and we'll read it one at a time at this time. And if you haven't sent your write-up to Miriam after the meeting or tomorrow, send her a copy of what you're reading, because that's part of Chris's personnel file. And so that said, we'll go with our usual round. Diane Kennedy, would you go first, please?
Could I ask for could I not go first? I need to take a break.
Okay, you want to go second?
I'm really
or
sorry.
third?
I just have to leave for 2 seconds. Yep.
Not a problem. When I see you again, you can go on, okay? Carrie Thompson?
Sure, I'll go first. All right, so again, I know that a lot of us put an exceptional amount of effort into these reviews and in meeting with Chris, and this is my first year doing this, and I will say it's obviously been an unprecedented year to do this in. So I just want to start off by saying I'm really proud of how our town and our town leadership and how Chris have dealt with the pandemic. I think that our town has done a really good job at all levels of coping with something that was really unexpected and something that we weren't necessarily ever thinking that we may have to deal with. And I think the town overall, Chris and our first responders and our police and fire chief, really everyone dealt with that well. So I think that that was something that was, in a way, showed the strength of our town and the stability of our town. And I'm proud of that, and I'm proud of how we've dealt with it. The unfortunate part about that is that I feel like it has set us back on a lot of our goals that we set as a select board. And full disclosure, I think that all of our goals are still in progress. I don't think any of them are complete. And I think part of that is because we had, 4 months where we really couldn't do anything. But overall, I think that our town can be a little bit braver. And I mean as a select board, and also, for our town manager as well. I think that we can be a little more bold and brave in pushing progress forward. I think that the town sometimes gets comfortable, and sometimes because we have such strong finances, because we've gotten our budget under control, it's easy to kind of just coast along without really pushing more fervently in terms of the goals we have. So overall, I would like to see, I guess, I want to continue the progress we have going on these goals. I believe that when we have another meeting about resetting our goals, I definitely think we want to include another one about adding diversity and inclusion to being an important part of our town. But in terms of the current goals, I think they're in progress. I want to see more progress, and I would like to see progress faster. My other, I think, biggest constructive criticism is I believe our town still can be a little more technologically savvy. We've done a great job of putting these meetings on Zoom. We've done a great job of getting people to adapt to that. I don't think every committee has adapted to Zoom in terms of scheduling and being as technologically inclusive as they could be. So I would like to see us improve on that. I also think that our website needs a big update. And I want to continue to work with 143 and continue putting things on Facebook and social media. But I think that this has been great because it's pushed our town out of the comfort zone with getting a little more modern with our technology and communication. And I want to see that also continue in the next year. So those are my broad comments. Happy to answer any questions or share more if you want.
Thank you very much, Carrie. Any questions with Carrie? Not, Paul, you want to go next and then Diane? Paul, you want to go next?
Sure.
And then Diane.
So again, I'm quite pleased. I've worked with Chris for now 6 years. This year was quite an adventure. A lot of the things that occurred even before the pandemic, all the various plans, the open space plan, the harbor plan, the other master plan, were really pretty impressively completed, which is kind of nice to see even before all of this. And then when the pandemic hit, there was at one point I was sitting with Chris and talking to Chief Sylvia and Chief Quigley, thinking that we may have to shut the schools down, shut the town down, looking for places where there could be a potential portable hospital. And we looked at all options, and that the pivot and the design for making the town run while in this situation occurred in just a few weeks. And it was, I must say, I was delighted to see it happen. The fact that, the technology was in place helped it work quite well. Now, I think Carrie's right, there is more to do, but a few years back, putting in a cable network for the town offices allowed a lot of the Zoom platform to be used at a pretty high level and large numbers in the bandwidth and things like that. So that's been quite helpful. Looking at overall performance, I'm very pleased with him. I think he's done a fantastic job. The finances, the hires, the way the towns has executed through this pretty unusual event. I think that, I will mirror Carrie's options, that I think if we can get the technology up and running, like she said, we're getting a lot of the other committees as facile with Zoom or other platforms that would be able to be available for the town people as well as the committees would do well. It did show in the town meeting how effectively even teleconferencing was to allow for that town meeting to go off with 28 articles and pretty smoothly, which was quite good. I think the finances are, we've also spoken to Chris about the finances, not just now, but a year from now and 2 years from now. And there's already plans to look at if there'll be potential cuts in the budget and where the options are for finances for the town. And I think that's part of the being able to adapt and motivate the team he's assembled to be able to run the town and make it work. I've met many people in the area that have said, "Where do you live?" I said, "I live in Cohasset." They said, "You have a great town manager and a great town bunch of officials." I said, "We do." And I think this has been evident over the last 8 weeks, but it was there before as well, where we saw the finances, the efficiency in town meeting, the efficiency of a lot of the operations of the town, even in this situation, but far before that as well. I'm very pleased with them, and I really am be delighted to work with them in the future. I'm done.
Thank you very much, Paul. Diane? Anything questions on Paul's? Diane?
No, thank you. Sorry, I needed to get some more water. I actually, I want to say that the process has been prescribed by case law, and it used to be that a subgroup of the Board of Selectmen would basically cull and analyze and do the presentation that Miriam did, and that was found to be a violation of the open meeting law, having each of us know what everybody else said. And it is, the personnel files are supposed to be private. So the process has been for the last couple of years exactly what it is this year. And in every community that I'm aware of, it has been delegated to the HR director to do that presentation and summary of kind of the quantitative data. So, and this is our opportunity to summarize some of the qualitative data or qualitative information that we have. So I actually probably gave on all of the goals, with the exception of the COVID response goals, I gave in progress. And that is typically where things are at, because if the issue rises to the level of a priority for the Board of Selectmen, it's usually something pretty important to the town that's going to be ongoing, especially, you know, things like when we've had financial goals. So they're kind of are always there and omnipresent, and there are goals, but they become Chris's as the, you know, day-to-day operations manager to see that they get through to the right channels. My general comments for Chris is every year there's some development, some vote, some change, something that happens and steers us off course. And the most important thing in any kind of management structure, whether you're running a multi-billion-dollar corporation or a small nonprofit or a community, is staying mission focused and staying on course. Those of you that sail probably know, you know, when choppy waters, you have to make some slight adjustments, and, you know, the sails will change. But the most important thing is steady management, smart management, and a focus on the goals. And I think we have seen that from Chris and his team. And I think his greatest achievement always, and the thing that we should be looking at and evaluating most critically, is what he gets from his employees. And I think we've seen that in the most extraordinary times that we're in. We were still able to go to town meeting with almost every article we had planned for town meeting. There were a lot of people, including myself, that were a little reluctant about how that was going to play out, and it worked. So I have been extraordinarily pleased with Chris over the last number of years that he's been here, and I affirm my confidence in him as a manager, which is his primary job. I do think I would love to see more attention from the management point of view to our committees, and you know, kind of, we all as community leaders have a responsibility to go out and try to bring more people into our committees and boards. But I think Chris can help us with that in terms of providing staff and training for committees and things like that. So that was my topic that I think he would benefit from further attention, is really working with us, with the Board of Selectmen or the Select Board, and the other committees on creating a more robust committee structure and training and whatever is needed for committees to function optimally. So I've been incredibly pleased. We've stayed on course, we've stayed on mission, and I think that's why we have been as successful as we are in advancing as many initiatives as we have over the last couple of years. But to Carrie's point, you can't rest. And again, you know, we have to just keep steady, because I think we're going to be thrown a number of curveballs over the next couple of months. And I appreciate the fact that we do have the steady leadership and a very competent leadership team in town. So thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Any commentary on Diane's? Okay, Jack Creighton. 1 second, Jack.
We all set? Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to the professional conflict of interest with the, personal report of our Chris's personal aide and Miriam. Diane's point about the case law refers to that you cannot do this with we can't do that under open meeting law. I still have a very serious problem with the direct report conducting this. And as I read about what was selected to be put in the report, which is the only thing that the public gets to see, I think everything should be made public, quite honestly. I don't see any reason why not, but evidently it won't be. So the public is seeing as version sanitized by somebody who works directly to the person being evaluated. And I don't know, maybe there's a different world that other people live in, but in my professional world, that would never be acceptable. So I think there's a fundamental problem. I will say that I think Chris has done a good job in coordinating the response to the virus. It's a challenge. And I think a lot of the relationships that he had built over the years were valuable, and he put them to good use. So I think he's to be congratulated for that. I also think that a lot of the boards and commissions, and echo what Diane has said, have done tremendous work in this town. It makes it so much easier to govern when they've done the work. We're about to hear from the Harbor Committee, which has been weighed over a very complicated thing of various constituencies over 18 months, probably 2 years at this point, and put together a plan. They had to deal with the state and conflicting regulations. And this is an example of the type of high quality work that is done by citizens. And I think the citizens should get that. Chris can help to facilitate that, but sometimes there's a tendency to say they did well, and maybe I would prefer to say some of the boards and commissions have done very well. There's an overlying theme that has been my concern as a member of the select board, which has to do with transparency. It has to do with private meetings. It has to do with taking the power of the select board and the town manager taking that power. For instance, I'm very concerned about a number of private meetings. Now, Chris is very clear that he believes there's value to private meetings, and many decisions need to be made in private, presumably because the unwashed public shouldn't be allowed to know what's really being done in their name with their resources. That causes me great concern. Are there some examples? Yes, there's some examples. Were they in the report? No, but I'll give them to them. One of them is at one point it was forced to be read at a select board meeting that the Town Manager Act specifically says that attorneys can only be hired by the Board of Selectmen. We have a plethora of attorneys doing work. Some have been appointed by the Selectmen, Board of Select, or the Select Board. Some may not. We don't know. The Select Board really specifically asked the town manager for a list of all of those. And this was done some 4 months ago. Do we have the list? No. Have I asked for it several times? Yes, I was told. Chris told me that he responds to the Board of Selectmen, not to original Select Board members. All right, fine. But as long as we're clear about that. However, the Select Board did ask to do that, and that hasn't been done. And if these attorneys are hired without proper authorization, rather than going through the town council, of course, it costs us money because the town council is on retainer. We don't pay extra for that in most cases. So we're incurring bills. We're not being told we can't even get a list. Maybe that's private control. He runs it. One thing that bothers me greatly, an example that didn't really, is the youth center. We made that a primary goal. It's so important, and the middle school kids are vulnerable, and we've spoken to it many, many times, and it's been on the agenda a lot. The town should know that when we first discussed it, and this is another example, Chris was strenuously arguing we didn't have time, we needed to do a study, et cetera, and a lot of things. But the bottom line is nothing gets going forward, and then we say that it's because of the virus. Meanwhile, other things that benefit developers and easements, they get fast-tracked. The youth center does not get it. So that's an example, and I think that's a very, serious. Requests for emails, public records. Who have you been talking to? All right. Now, when the response to that, right, is to start attacking the select board member who raises those questions in a respectful manner, I might say, right, and using town resources to do that, this causes problems. So, although Chris has done some things, I think that first of all, the report that's being made public was done by a direct employee of his who's well, we've already been over that. I think all the things should be disclosed so we would know whether some quotes were from one source rather than another. But, you know, there are some other things, but I think the theme is the town manager is the manager that works for the people, and the people's will is reflected in elected officials, elected to the select board, and we are answerable to the people. And I think we need transparency. I think we need openness. And it is not the town manager manages at the direction of the people, not the town manager manages the people to advance his goals. So I have some serious concerns. I think it's pretty obvious. But again, I thank you all for your time. And I really thank the people of Cohasset who are listening to this meeting, because I know we selectmen sometimes go on a bit. But anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack. Any comment on Jack's comments? Okay, I'll read my evaluation. It is as follows. I find Chris to be an excellent listener, negotiator, and mediator, especially when working in areas of potential conflict or in union and other contract or settlement negotiations. He is also a constructive, flexible, and creative problem solver. Chris is very good at recognizing and articulating opposing views while addressing a problem or possible conflict. Thus, he is able to effectively seek and achieve sustainable compromise. As well, Chris's leadership and proactive negotiation skills have enabled the town to enjoy increasingly productive town and special meetings, which are the bedrock of our grassroots democracy and one of our most prized and respected traditions. Chris is very knowledgeable about his position and role as a town manager, and yet he remains willing and eager to engage in new learning and training himself and others. Chris conducts himself as town manager with a high level of professionalism and integrity. Chris has made good progress on being organized, timely, and clear in his communications with our many town committees and boards, which is essential to the functioning of our town government. More progress is anticipated in this area as effective and dependable citizen and committee support and leadership from the executive branch is the cornerstone upon which lies the credibility and ultimately the effectiveness of our government. As well, Chris is effectively increasing his knowledge of and use of social media, weekly public reports, and information age technology essential to the proper effective functioning of a modern government. The town continues to benefit greatly from Chris's skills at and strong desire to unite our town both in its civic as well as communal character. Of particular note has been Chris's effective leadership during the current and ongoing COVID-19 epidemic. The Board of Selectmen and the town in general have been kept well informed on government affairs efforts to combat the COVID disease, as well as advised on everyone's roles and responsibilities in effectively combating this disease. Kevin McCarthy, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, July 2020. Okay. Any comments on my comments? So if they're not seeing any, at this time here, we do allow Chris Senior to respond to his annual review. And Chris, as they say in show business, you have the mic.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It continues to be a personal and professional honor to serve the Cohasset community as town manager. I am grateful for the support offered by the members of the Select Board and all the other boards, committees, and officials I work with during the course of a year. Whether planning for town meeting, addressing the needs of our seniors, collaborating with the school department, working with our top-notch IT team to improve service delivery and improve public access. And over these past 4 months, dealing with an unprecedented public health emergency that has in particular stressed extra burdens on our health department, our first responders, and our schools. It's been a great privilege to lead the staff of dedicated, hardworking professionals every day. Together during FY20, we together have made major progress on addressing this board's goals of creating a strategy to meet the affordable housing challenge, making progress on a plan for town hall, responding to the addiction and substance abuse crisis, and beginning the implementation of the major plans developed by the Cohasset community over the past several years. We also came together as a community to meet the challenges of an unprecedented public health emergency, the impacts of which have been felt by us all. 7 years ago, when I arrived in Cohasset from New York, knowing literally no one, the then members of this board made a commitment to work with me on a collaborative basis to make this town a better place. Together, we have built a stronger Cohasset, more resilient in the face of challenges, and more adaptable to the needs of the community. I look forward to the same collaborative partnership in the year ahead to tackle the new challenges ahead and the new goals this board will soon establish. Thank you all. You're still muted, Kevin.
Thank you very much, Chris. Any commentary on Chris's commentary before we finalize this Chris's annual review? I don't see any. Okay, I think we've had a good fulsome discussion, as Somerset Maugham once said, and why don't we conclude the annual review at that, and thank you very much for everybody who participated in putting it together, and for all the efforts that this year took to actually create a time for an annual review. So thank you all, and we'll now move on to the next agenda item. And the next agenda item is the Cohasset Harbor Plan Review and Vote, link to the Harbor Plan Review and Vote. And there was a link in the agenda for the public if you want to see the entire harbor plan, as well as we've had the entire harbor plan available to us all for several weeks, if not several months. And so with that, this has now been reviewed and voted on, I believe, by the Harbor Committee, as well as the Planning Board. And now it's for us to have a public hearing, and which this now is, and we're welcoming any public commentary for those of you who hear us out there. And at which point the Cohasset Board of Selectmen will then Select Board will go ahead and vote on this. And with that, I now turn the microphone over to Lauren. Is that correct, or is it Tim?
I think it's Lauren's going to start, and I just made you co-host, Lauren. Is that going to? Do you have the PowerPoint? Are you going to run it?
I can either run it, or Emily, would you like to run it? Whichever.
Lauren, whichever is easiest for you.
I'll run the PowerPoint then.
Okay, great. I'll just let you know.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you, everybody. It's good to see everyone this evening.
Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you. We're here tonight to have a discussion about the Municipal Harbor Plan. The Municipal Harbor Plan, we were originally scheduled to come before you on March 31st, but as many things were postponed by the emergency response, this is one of them. So here we are. We're excited to be here tonight. This is a process that began over 2 years ago, maybe even more. Formally began public meetings with the Cohasset Harbor Group, the Harbor Committee, the former town planner before my time, and eventually our harbor planning consultant, Emily Innes, who's here with from Harriman tonight. She'll be giving a formal presentation. So this began in 2018, many meetings, a very public-facing process. There's been iterative drafts of the harbor plan. The March 2020 draft is the most recent plan. It was voted upon by the Harbor Committee and recommended to move forward through the local adoption process in March. And then shortly thereafter, it was recommended by the Planning Board to move forward as well. So I won't get too into the details. You'll hear from Emily Innes in a moment. But this was it's a document that provides vision and long-term planning goals and strategies for our harbor area. And it does tie in also as well to our master plan. So I am looking forward to hearing your response this evening. And with that, I'll turn it over to Emily Innes. And then at the end, we can follow up. I'd like to also thank Tim Davis for being here. He's the chair of the Harbor Committee. So thank you, everybody.
I'll just wait.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Lauren. And Emily, welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be back in Cohasset, even though it's only virtually tonight. It was a disappointment to miss you all in March. Before I start, I know Lauren's going to run the PowerPoint presentation, but I would like to thank Lauren for all of her help. It was not easy coming into the middle of a planning process, and I think she did that extremely well. I'd also like to thank Tim Davis and the members of the Harbor Committee who have been with this process even longer than I have, and have been excellent voices in terms of giving comment on the plan, giving support throughout it. I've certainly enjoyed working with them, and also to all of the department heads and members of the Cohasset community that I interviewed and those who came to the various meetings. It was greatly appreciated, their input. So Lauren, whenever you're ready. Excellent, thank you. So if you'll just tick to the next slide. So I want to open up actually with what a municipal harbor plan is, which is Chapter 91 is the waterways legislation under Massachusetts general laws. And a municipal harbor plan was initially envisioned as a plan by which a local community could vary some of the goals, the policies, and the regulations of Chapter 91. Many communities, and Cohasset is one of them, choose to move beyond that. And actually, Lauren, if you go back one slide. So many communities choose to move beyond the specific regulations of a municipal harbor plan or the specific needs of that in order to do some long-term planning for the entire harbor, some of which deals with the Chapter 91 components and some of which go beyond that. And Cohasset did that. It is a voluntary process. It was initiated by the town itself, and we'll talk about a little bit about how that process happened. But overall, in terms of what the state's needs are, a municipal harbor plan really guides those actions of state agencies when looking at waterways permits and licenses, which come under Chapter 91. And as I said, it allows municipalities to vary certain of the standards. The key is that gives the town additional flexibility and control when those applications come in front of the state agencies. The state agencies already know what the town's priorities are. Next slide, Lauren, please. So as I mentioned, this was a voluntary process. It was initiated by the town who had requested a grant from the Seaport Economic Council. The SEC provided $80,000 with a $20,000 match from the town. The Board of Selectmen is the designated municipal official under 301 CMR 23. That's the regulations that govern the production of a municipal harbor plan. They appointed the Harbor Committee, or I should say you, since I'm presenting to you, appointed the Harbor Committee, and you designate the town's planning representative, which is, in this case, the Director of Planning, and is Lauren, and she has specific responsibilities under this as well. And then it's actually not usual for a Board of Selectmen to hold a public hearing, but I think it's a great idea, and it was mentioned in the RFP to which you responded, which is one of the reasons that we are here tonight. I think particularly for a town, having the Board of Selectmen hold a hearing at which members of the public can have a last chance to review and make comments on the plan is a fantastic idea. I will say that that's a last chance at the municipal level. We will talk about what happens at the state level as we move through the presentation. Next slide, please, Lauren. So the process is the municipality starts with a pre-planning process, and this took place before we, Harriman, were selected by the town and arrived on the scene. The Harbor Committee had already done a lot of work. The municipality then submits a request for notice to proceed to the state, and what this outlines is the public process, the general scope of the planning process, and the topics that will be addressed by the planning process. And we worked with then planner Peter Machek and the Harbor Committee to prepare this. We also worked with CZM to prepare it. It was submitted and approved by the Director of the Office of Coastal Zone Management, which the technical term is that the notice to proceed was then issued. And then the rest of the process is developing the plan using that community engagement process that we discussed, and I'll show you some of those dates in a minute, and then submitting the plan. And we're going to talk about what the approval process is after the municipal approval process ends. So then the state has its own process, and that process is actually going to be another couple of months, and I've got a timeline for that at the end. The planning process to date, you can see up now the number of meetings and also the different drafts that came out. So the first part, the notice to proceed, had a public comment period during it. We had several workshops in here, and then in January, April, July, and September of 2019, there were drafts that were posted on the website for public comment as well as review by the Harbor Committee, and we received very helpful responses to people as a result of that. And I know you all know that at the same time there was a zoning process that involved the planning board to create zoning that would be compatible with, and then the municipal harbor plan would be compatible with that zoning. The idea was that the zoning would draw upon the goals for the harbor that were unearthed during the period of public engagement. So we tried very hard to make sure that zoning and the municipal harbor plan were in alignment with each other. Next slide, please. So this is just a brief slide of the plan contents. I'm actually going to break this down over the next few slides. So if you'll go to the next slide, please. This is the general planning area for the harbor, and it was important that we include the water, the edges of the water and land. And there's a particular section of the harbor plan that looks at the connections between Cohasset Village and the harbor itself, and there's important reasons for doing that, which we'll talk about. The red line you see on there is a combination of several lines on Massachusetts GIS that make up the putative Chapter 91 jurisdiction. I would say to anybody who might own property in this area, you should not rely on GIS. You should do your own due diligence. And in fact, one of the appendices to the harbor plan is our due diligence on the number of Chapter 91 licenses that are in existence for the area. But this gives a general idea, and that red line is important because it lets us know what land is within Chapter 91 jurisdiction as far as we can tell at this level, and what land is without it. Next slide, please. So the first thing we needed to do was come up with a vision for the harbor. And we did this after public input and working with the Harbor Committee, also interviewing various people, primarily department heads, but also from the town side, but also various institutions in the harbor area. And this is the one that we came up with. And because not everybody's looking at this from a large screen, it's one of the few things that I'm going to read out loud. The Cohasset Harbor is a jewel box of a harbor. This small area supports a variety of users: commercial fishermen, recreational boaters, sailors, rowers, scientists, dog walkers, coffee drinkers, diners, artists, residents, visitors, and those just hanging out and enjoying the beautiful sunrises, sunsets, and breezes off the water. The vision for this harbor is simply to enhance the land, the water, and the edge in between to support access to and enjoyment of the harbor for all ages, interests, and abilities. The key is to balance the needs of the variety of uses to ensure a safe and pleasant experience for all. Part of that enhancement is a strong link between the harbor and the village, a link with physical, visual, and economic components. And I will say that this vision drove everything else that we did with the planning process and the document after that. Next slide, please. So, no, actually go back one. So the implementation plan is an important part of this because it basically takes all of the components that we brought forward in the planning process and figures out how do you get from where we are now to what the vision, how the vision would be implemented. And so we looked at the investment required, regulatory changes, and any other actions that would take the community from where they are now to that vision that was identified as part of the planning process. And it does include 2 minor modifications to Chapter 91 that bring the requirements into alignment with the zoning. Next slide, please. So the 4 plan components, immediate plan components, are harbor governance, which looks at who's responsible for the health of the harbor and how that works together. And health is importantly defined as social, environment, and economic health. The water sheet looks at activities on or under the surface of the water, so that includes dredging, but also commercial and recreational fishing and boating, and the elements that support all of that. EDGES really looks at soft and hard infrastructure. So it's both the environmental components and the vegetated ecosystems, but also hard infrastructure such as seawalks, docks, and piers. And land allows the access to the water. So it's buildings, parking, parks, anything that allows people to get to either physical connection with the water or visual connection to the water. And that also included linking the harbor to the village. Next slide. So the other two components are the Chapter 91 modifications, which we mentioned earlier, and the implementation plan, which links the recommendations from each of these four sections into the related actions. Next, please. Now, the Harbor Committee, before we, Harriman and our team, GEI and FXM Associates started, had already identified certain specific goals for the harbor process. And these were guiding elements to us, both at the beginning of the process, throughout the process, but also at the end as a check to make sure we had gone back and addressed each one of the initial goals. It started with supporting the Cohasset commercial fishing fleet, who were identified, representatives were involved throughout. Also, public use of and access to the harbor, what the appropriate improvements would be to the land and the water side. Again, public use of the harbor and support for the town and civic organizations. And I will say that one of the challenges of this process has been the number of town and civic organizations in a very small area. It was a real help that they were also involved in helping us understand what those relationships were. Looking at that geographical relationship, but also commercial and on land and water side activity, improving the harbor management and uses, and improvements to the ecosystem and environmental issues. Looking at dredging plan, and this was something that GEI certainly contributed to. And then finally, that implementation plan, the action plan, and the steps to get there. Next slide, please. So we had two public meetings, May 31st and December 17th. We also had an open house prior to the December 17th, and these were both in 2018. And we did, at the first was objectives and a visioning process from which that vision was drawn. The open house was really used as a precursor to drive people to the December meeting. And at the meeting, we started talking about prioritization of goals and actions and grew from that as well. Next slide, please. And so these are the recommendations, and the recommendations you see here, if any of you were at the November 18th meeting last year, which I think was the last public meeting, you'll notice that there are some tweaks to the recommendations I'm about to present, and that was as a direct result of information after that meeting, and also that we received from the public, and also work with the Harbor Committee as they reviewed the final drafts and gave us input onto that. So these recommendations, I'm just going to go through quickly each set of recommendations, but these looked at, the first one's at the harbor governance. So who's involved with the harbor and how they're involved. We noted that the town has a Government Island Advisory Committee that hasn't been active, and since Government Island came out as something that really needed to be looked at the context of the entire harbor, we recommended that they be merged with the Harbor Committee, and that the Harbor Committee's charge be looked at now that there would be a state-approved municipal harbor plan to see if that needed to be revised and modified. Considering some of the funding options, so one of the ones that we discovered as we looked at other harbors was the Waterways Enterprise Fund, so we suggest that the town look at that. We also suggest the Friends of the Cohasset Harbor be established. There are some things such as wayfinding or other placemaking opportunities that could be funded by Friends of the Cohasset Harbor, and there are models throughout the Commonwealth, including a Friends of the Cohasset Library, I believe. Documenting public safety responsibilities in the harbor. I think everybody who's involved with public safety knows who they are and what they're doing, but the public wasn't always as sure. So documenting and publicizing that. Establishing an intermunicipal agreement with Situate because the harbor is actually shared between the two communities, and publicizing the emergency response plan. Again, everybody who's involved knows, but it's not necessarily widely known among the public. Next slide, please. So for the water sheet, we did receive a number of requests from the commercial fishermen at the beginning of the process in March 2018, and those were drawn through to the plan for consideration by the town. Conduct a mooring study. There was a lot of questions, as we heard, over what the mooring capacity would be, so we're recommending a study. And that is quite common for plans at this level. The harbor plan is a high-level plan that anticipates other studies. So another study that we anticipate is a dredging study that came up frequently during the conversation. The Parker Avenue boat ramp was under construction. So frankly, it was an easy win to put in that it should be completed, but I think that has been well ongoing. And then one consideration that required a lot more effort than this study could be provided, and I think it's one of the things that the town will find comes up over and over again, is while both commercial fishing and recreational boating are very important to the town, it is a small harbor. And there were some thoughts that there were conflicts that existed in terms of land use and water use, and that some people wanted to see certain areas of the harbor devoted to commercial fishing and others devoted to recreational boating. Others would concern that that would excessively limit the use of the harbor and make it more difficult. So we recommended a study that looks specifically at how that could be done and whether it should be done. Next slide, please. In terms of the edges, this is where considerations of cost frequently occur because of the level of hard infrastructure that you have here. Sea level rise played a huge portion of, or a huge role in the discussion of these areas, both in the maintenance and perhaps further creation of hard infrastructure, but also because of the marshes and the other ecological components you have here, there was a desire not to see everything become hard infrastructure. And so when we look at the edges, certainly undertaking a hazard mitigation plan, you'd had already done your municipal vulnerability plan by this time. So we're able to incorporate a lot of the comments relative to relevant to the harbor here. The breakwater was a big question out there, and understanding how that would function as the sea levels rose was important. We recommended a more in-depth study. Same for the seawalls, an evaluation, and at least certainly on the public infrastructure side by the town, repair of the seawalls, and then looking at the health of the soft infrastructure. And I have to say that members of the Harbor Committee were extremely helpful in helping us understand further what that would mean. Thinking about an education program that would help people protect the health of the harbor, and understanding the health of that harbor also has impacts for A, its usability, and B, the health of the land. Thinking about a hydrological model of the harbor, which would help both with sea level rise and understand some of the silting that happens in the harbor. Regulatory changes, which we talked about in terms of the zoning, and development incentives that might or might not be paired with that. This came through a couple of different ways. And then evaluating the infrastructure. And then finally, there's not a lot of shade in parts of the harbor. So thinking about the impact of heat islands in terms of the usability and the access to the harbor. Next slide. On recommendations, again, Government Island is, in addition to the water sheet of the harbor, so the surface of the water, Government Island also has a lot of users in a relatively small space. So we recommended a specific study on Government Island itself to see were there ways of accommodating not only the current uses, but future uses as well. I was certainly interested to hear earlier in your meeting about the church that was looking at potentially using the outdoor portion of this. And I think community involvement with Government Island has a strong history, and it would be interesting to see what other uses might be used here in the future. Parking, of course, came up as a huge issue because with more desired access to the harbor, how do people get there and park there became a critical issue. And then looking in terms of the land, installing streetscape improvements. As you all know, there's a sidewalk in parts of the area. There is a marked path in other parts, and integrating that. signs and gateways and wayfinding, the idea of when you enter the harbor, how do you get to the village? When you get to the village, how are you directed to the harbor? And really establishing those things that draw people from one to the other. We talked a lot about Elm Street and how to get people walking or biking from the downtown to the harbor and back again. Developing a marketing plan that thought about how to connect the village and the harbor economically. One of my favorites was a caught in Cohasset and eaten in Cohasset program, where people could go to a restaurant in Cohasset and eat the catch of the day. And then a really interesting idea that came out that we liked was creating special permits for young business owners, maybe during the summer or in parts of the year, to have seasonal businesses down there, encouraging entrepreneurship in the town and increasing the public activity on the waterfront. Next slide, please. In terms of Chapter 91, this actually took up a lot of the time last year as we went back and forth once the zoning process was concluded with the town meeting vote last spring, figuring out how Chapter 91 either could or should be modified to be consistent with the zoning. We had a number of meetings with the planning board and some public meetings, including the one in November, to talk about how this would work. And the one that the two modifications we finally decided were the most appropriate had to do with the height and the setback from the shoreline. And so in Chapter 91, the height is limited to 55 feet within 100 feet landward of the high water mark, and then half a foot for every additional foot of separation from the high water mark. The new zoning, however, restricted it to 35 feet in height above base flood elevation. So the amplification, that means it's made stronger, to Chapter 91 was that the limitation under the municipal harbor plan is also 35 feet in height above base flood elevation, so that the zoning and the Chapter 91 requirement here are now consistent. The same thing in the zoning, there was a requirement that no building be constructed within 25 feet landward of the project shoreline. And that we made the same recommendation for the Chapter 91 modification, which has a more complicated calculation in terms of the weighted average distance from the high water mark to the landward lot line, and to simplify it, and also to ensure the ability to have public access to the shoreline. We created that amplification. Next slide, please. So the final pieces of this is obviously the Board of Selectmen's public hearing tonight, at which you will take your vote. If you vote to move it forward, if you vote acceptance of this plan, if there are any edits that we need to make to this plan as a result of your comments or comments from members of the public under your direction, then we will do so. And then we would be looking to submit the plan to CZM by July 15th. So that's pulling together all the appendices, the final draft. In doing that, if we make it by July 15th, it would be published in the Environmental Monitor by July 22nd. There is a public comment period, and this is where the municipal public process ends, but the state's public process begins. The public comment period is 30 days after publication, so it would end August 21st. During that period, CZM will hold a public hearing in Cohasset to ensure that anybody who wishes to comment on the document can do so. They can also submit written comments. The instructions for doing that will be in the Environmental Monitor. There is a consultation period with the municipality after that, and also with other relevant state agencies. And I should have said that when this is submitted to CZM, it also has to be submitted to a laundry list of state agencies. It also has to be distributed in specific areas throughout town, including town hall and the town library. After the consultation period ends, which is October 20th, then the CZM has 21 days to issue its written decision. So, and we stay on board with you until that decision is issued, so that if there are questions or things that we need to address, we would work with Laura and Lynn to do so. And that is the end of my presentation. As I said, it has been a real pleasure working with the Cohasset community And I appreciate that opportunity on behalf of myself and my colleagues.
Thank you very much, Emily. Appreciate that thorough review of the harbor plan. Again, we've seen a number of aspects of this over the months. So appreciate that. Tim, I noticed you're here. Would you like to make any commentary to the
Sure.
board, to the
Sure.
plan?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Tim.
Okay, thank you very much. There are many, many people who I would like to thank for bringing this harbor plan to where it is today. Many people on the harbor committee, many people in the community, the Board of Selectmen have been very helpful in getting us to where we are. But particularly, I'd like to call out Emily and Lauren, who have been right there with us. Lauren, I know, came into the middle of this. Emily from the day one, and it's been terrific working with both of you. Thank you. I think that, as Emily pointed out, there are the top two priorities of the harbor plan are, number one, the commercial fishing fleet, and number two, public access to the harbor. First, on the commercial fishing fleet, we have been moving forward with that recommendation in the harbor plan, and there is work being done on Government Island with the Government Island Pier and the floats and a lift system to help the commercial fishermen in their work. Obviously, it's a priority not only for the harbor, but for the town to keep our commercial fishing fleet viable and sustaining long term. The second one, in terms of public access, many of you may know that unless you are a member of the Cohasset Yacht Club, the Cohasset Sailing Club, CSCR, or CMI, or you own property around the harbor, it is very difficult to enjoy the harbor. So that has been a priority for the harbor committee and through the harbor plan to figure out how we can provide better access to the harbor for the community. One of the things that we have done in conjunction with the planning board and board of selectmen and the developer is, and it came through the town bylaw, is to create a viewscape down Elm Street. So as you come down Elm Street, the connection from the village to the harbor, you'll be able to look not at a blank wall that you do today, but you'll look right out on our gorgeous harbor. And so that will be part of the new development. There are many other things that are going to be done. There are numerous suggestions in that plan that will take probably 10 years to implement. And the investment in the harbor over the next 10 years, easily between the public, private, and nonprofit investment will be $50 to $100 million. And I think that we have an opportunity here, which is really a once in a generation opportunity to create a new, vital, and vibrant harbor for Cohasset. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. And I must say, you have worked very hard to accomplish this harbor plan. We've all personally watched this rendition of an agony and an ecstasy. Tonight, we have the ecstasy. And but your very, very hard work is duly noted. And the fact that we have citizens like you, that is what's driven us to where we have been able to achieve in this community over the last 300 years. Citizens like that kind of drive is what makes Cohasset what it is special. So I do want to note that, and thank you very much for your service. Does anybody have any comment now on the report that has been given to us? Paul Schubert.
So I'll make it very quick. Just a question to Emily. So some harbors down on the Cape will have what is basically a commercial area of the harbor, but they're bigger. Would one option from the point of view of the harbor plan, would that be a way to entertain, let's say the pier is mainly for commercial, and then you'll put, I don't know, buoys or some sort of understanding that you allow the access for the larger fishing boats to have quicker access to those areas than other areas that might be more just for entertainment purposes, and would that make sense?
So that's one of the things that we heard talked about. Again, to your point, is it the pier that's closed off? Is it to commercial fishing, and there's some sort of access way? I think the concern that we heard is just because of how that harbor is configured, the different currents in it, the different types of users, that it was too simple a sort of recommendation for us to say, yes, you should absolutely do that. And it definitely required further study. I would say one of the things that we did in the implementation plan is we linked a lot of the potential studies together and said, if you do this, you should also do that. So for example, studying how or whether to separate access would go hand in hand with, say, for example, mooring study. And I think that was the important part. But certainly that's exactly what was talked about, is would it be possible to do that?
And you know, unfortunately, we're limited by the size of the harbor alone. You know, a place like Chatham or Harwich has several harbors, and that may be a tough thing to do.
That's part of it.
Thank you, Paul. Tim Davis, then Diane Kennedy.
I'll just say briefly, Paul, that is it is a major concern. I can tell you that the town has applied for a $1.3 million grant from the Seaport Economic Council to engineer and improve the Government Island docks specifically for commercial fishing. If we can do that and allow 3 or more fishing boats to be in at that dock at the same time, then we can turn over the Lawrence Wharf area to recreational use only. So that's definitely in the purview of what we're trying to do.
Thank you, Tim. Diane.
Thank you. I just wanted to say congratulations. Kevin put it the best, agony and ecstasy. And one of the nice little links, we were talking earlier about our goals for the year, and one of them is to kind of make sure that the master plan and the harbor plan and the open space and rec plan and the affordable housing plan and the housing production plan, they all kind of work together so that we can move, you know, bigger projects and bigger goals forward. And, you know, one of the things in the master plan, and is something we'll be discussing tonight, is an economic development committee. And it's certainly, in a lot of ways, it's more important now than ever because of the interruption in businesses. And so the village is really a primary, should be a primary focus. And linking it to the harbor, of course, is something we all vision as something that's going to be really powerful for the town, for its economic development, for recreation purposes. So I'm very excited about how all of these are going to start working together in implementation going forward. So thank you all for your hard work.
Thank you. Any other commentary? Okay, and I have Jack Creighton, and then there's a public comment as well. I'll take you, Jack Creighton, first.
Right. Yeah, I congratulate the Harbor Committee and Tim for all the work. I've been in this beginning. I started off as the Harbor Liaison from the Conservation, ended up on the Select Board. Select Board asked me to continue as the Harbor Liaison from the Select Board. I can assure the town that these people on the Harbor Committee worked hard, many, many hours. There's a broad cross section. All kinds of different things were considered, and the impact of the harbors is huge, and the access to the harbor is huge. And I think we've made a big step forward. And this is a step forward because people in the community who, after all, know what is needed best, step forward. We had good leadership. Tim just hung in there countless hours. So I think we can move forward with this. I think we should be very proud of Democracy at Work in Cohasset. And again, to the Harbor Committee, thank you very much for your hard work.
Okay, I have a question from the, thank you, Jack. I have a question from the audience from Susan Bryant in Cohasset. The question is, can you please talk about how the Seaport Economic Development Grant application fits with other grant applications? And that requires a certain degree of expertise, which I'm delighted to turn over to somebody else. Emily, you just blipped out there.
Yeah, if nobody else wants to jump in, I will say that we've been having a lot of robust conversations with the harbor partners like CSCR. In fact, we filed a grant for them, or with them, I should say, a couple weeks ago. Lauren, is that right? The CZ, the Coastal Zone Management Grant.
That was June 11th.
Yeah. So we have filed a specific grant to move ahead on assessing CSCR facility, for example, and then 2 grants for the Seaport Economic in this round, one for the dock assessment and one to rebuild Park Avenue boat ramp. And there's more to come. In fact, we just completed the tide analysis as well, Lauren. I think we expanded that work, the tidal pathways, I think.
We did. That was it was through a municipal vulnerability preparedness grant, and we assessed storm tide pathways, which will do an analysis. Well, we have the data now for this to map when and where areas will flood based on site conditions all along the coast. So that was one of our coastal resiliency efforts, and we are continuing to advance efforts that are for resiliency. That was really the lens that we went to the CZM grant that we just applied for on June 11th for resiliency assessment of the building that we know is in a floodplain.
Okay, anything else? Any other questions, comments from the board? And I don't see anything further from the public. So I think what would be appropriate now is if someone were to make a motion relative to our acceptance of this plan. Oh, wait a second, there's a question. Let me just see here. One other question before we get rid of this. Again, from Susan Bryant. Thank you for the answer. And can we also mention how local youth would be involved in these studies? Yes. I'm looking at you, Chris.
CSCR has been a great partner, and we expect that we'll continue to be a great partner. And as part of the assessment, I think of the property that they sit in is not just its physical assessment, but helping assess that for better programmatic use, right? To allow them to maybe expand their lab or do other things that could really enhance their ability. And again, we're always on the lookout, by the way. We had looked very closely with Jack Buckley at another grant that unfortunately it didn't quite work. It didn't quite work, and we all agreed that it didn't quite work. But we are constantly looking for part and help CSCR support its work as an educational center for, and again, most certainly involving the kids there.
In addition, also, one thing I really like in that plan is a provision to encourage young people who are starting out in business, to gain employment and work as fishermen and what other occupations they can around the harbor. So I think that's another youth-oriented aspect of the plan that I think is very, very good that I liked. Anything else on this question? Okay. Jack Creighton.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if we're ready for a motion, I'd like to make the motion that we accept the Cohasset Municipal Harbor Plan.
Second.
And the motion's been made, the motion's seconded. Is there any further discussion? I don't hear of any further discussion, so we'll do a roll call vote. Diane Kennedy.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul
Schubert, aye.
Harry Thompson, aye.
Jack.
Jack Creighton, aye.
Kevin McCarthy, aye.
Congratulations.
Long time. It's a unanimous decision. And congratulations to all those that have worked on this. This is a great community accomplishment. And so thank you all for that. I do have to notice, Diane had stated, this is in this year here, we've completed a master plan, complete plan, and we have completed and formally approved an open space and recreation plan. And now this represents the completion of an extensive harbor-related plan. In addition, we've formulated, and it's a very active committee, a master plan implementation committee, which will help actually make all of these programs assist in and accomplishing all the objectives and goals that are in these programs, something we hadn't done before. And that committee's off and running very well. And so we've really done, I think, a great job of this extensive planning, and we've got it going and now into vigorous implementation. So congratulations all. Okay, thank you. The next item on our agenda I will now move to will be the Economic Development Committee.
It's a discussion, and this is here we're not going to make appointments to the committee, but we're going to review the charge of an economic development committee, which is an important aspect of both the master plan and something that is especially needed in town nowadays today, as we are emerging from the COVID crisis, and it'll be a long time emergent, as to have this committee going actively to facilitate that. With that brief introduction, I'll turn the conversation over to Chris Senior.
So there's information in your packet that Diane Kennedy pulled together from a variety, and we had pulled out some old minute books too. I think there's been a couple of past iterances of this committee, and I think that Diane probably has the most comprehensive view of it, so I would turn it over to her for further discussion.
Yes, and I shared with Kevin and Chris, I think on Friday or after the packet, maybe over the weekend, the Economic Development Council charge for the town of Easton, which is current and very active, and actually I think might be we don't have it in front of us, but it might be a better place to start. The last approved Economic Development Committee charge from the town of Cohasset, as far as we can tell looking at the minutes, was in 2005. And it launched, for those of you that were around at the time, it launched a Cohasset Day celebration and a lot of good marketing programs. And then in 2008, and this was in our packet, the current, and this goes way back, it's 2008, 12 years ago. The committee at the time put together like a 4-page charge that was very specific. You know, we want to have a Cohasset Day every year, and we want to do this and that and the other thing. And my understanding at the time was that the Board of Selectmen felt that that was too specific, and that a committee charge should be much more narrow. Have just a specific kind of mission statement and some, meeting requirements and reporting requirements back to the select board. We, in 2012 or 13, and we couldn't find any difference, any changes to the charge that was proposed and didn't pass in 2008. We appointed some people to the committee, to economic development, and then it just kind of went south. Talk about, sitting on a shelf. We never really sat down and worked out a charge. So I think that's what we need to do now, meaning not necessarily right this second, but certainly very soon, because, I would advocate to look at some economic development committees or councils in towns right now that, just give a bird's eye view kind of mission statement, and then some specific reporting structures. That would match how we've set up and given charges to other committees over the past couple of years. So I don't know where you want to go with that. But I know that charge from Easton, I don't believe was shared with all the members of the board.
I just shared it now, so you all have it for future consideration.
Did you send it
You're
to
muted,
us
Kevin.
via email or?
Yeah, I sent it by email. Yeah.
I think that the one from Easton is more direct, more concise, to the point of a actual functioning charge, perhaps probably what the board would need to have before it in order to review that and trim it down and so forth. Since we don't all have that, though, maybe what we should do is put that Easton one into the package for next week, and take this, the board take up the charge and work off of the one in Easton, and not the one that's from 2008 and apparently never got passed anyways. So I think if I'm hearing nods, it'll be okay on that. But I also saw Carrie has her hand up. Would you like to make a comment?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I'm looking over this attachment right now, and I agree that Easton has done a really good job at this. I feel like if we had looked at this 4 months ago, it probably would have been a very different discussion. And I think we also need to discuss how our current situation impacts what we think the goals of the Economic Development Council should be. I know that getting new business in and revitalizing is important, but I think we also more than ever have to support our current businesses in terms of getting back up off their feet from what's happened the past few months. So I do think we need to have kind of short-term and long-term goals for this council and discuss how COVID is possibly impacting what we want the charge to be right now.
100%. Yep, you're right.
That makes good sense. And also, yes, Paul Schubert.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the exact purpose of, you know, when this first came up, to my view, was to try to keep the current businesses up and alive and running. And then from there, the next step would be 9 months from now, 12 months from now, is how do we draw in more business, more economic development? But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's a two-tiered approach.
Okay, Jack Creighton and Diane. Jack, you wanted to speak?
Yeah, okay, yeah. I do spend a lot of time on this. I've been on a lot of things in Boston and in years past on development of communities, development, and my work on conservation and stormwater and regulations and things like that. One of the things we need to be always aware is that the development needs to be appropriate. And in Cohasset, we're a very special town, a unique town. So we may have to make sure that development is consistent with the character of Cohasset. We also have to understand, and I've shared this with other developers in town, we need to understand what will work in Cohasset, what will not. We don't have a lot of people. You can't put development that requires huge amounts of people. The circle, the trade circle of residents is not very large and not a lot of people. So when we do economic development, we need to make sure that it's closely kept aligned with community development and the Cohasset character. And understand that that Cohasset character is what makes many of our businesses very attractive and very successful. People want to come to Cohasset. So I guess the thing is we need to be careful we don't kill the goose that's laying the golden egg. But I think it's a great idea, and I've just read this charge. I think it's a good starting point.
Thank you, Jack. Diane?
I think in addition, one of the things we should think about so that we can actually move this forward at the next meeting is, you know, who would be the right representatives on this committee. You know, whether there should be somebody from planning or somebody from the master plan implementation committee, or how we can build this committee. I mean, I know a lot of people serve on multiple roles, but I think that's going to be critical too, is the makeup of the committee and what, you know, what they're representing, or what their expertise is being, you know, tapped, what expertise we're tapping into. So all of that just to think about over the next week.
Okay. All right. I think we will leave this then. And Tracy, I know you're there in space somewhere. Put this on, if you would, on the first iteration for the April, from the June 30th agenda, and take it up then. Before we get to the next thing, I see just as a question and answer. Okay. This one's from a Susan Bryant. And the question is, I might ask the same question. How might we, in spending town funds, direct some of them toward hiring local interns from amongst our community to both build community spirit and opportunity for the younger generation? I think that's a good perspective. And the idea is to incorporate young people in town in these kinds of plans and programs, and involve them actually in our government generally. So I like that suggestion, Chris.
And if I may, in a normal year, the town of Cohasset is the biggest employer of youth in Cohasset. Our employs dozens of kids. And Ted we're actually working now to try to get more of those kids active, both now with the playground and the park that was set up, and with hopefully an ability to launch some kind of programming this summer. So we most certainly are doing that. We've worked with Sandy Beach as well, and they have a little more robust program now going too. So again, we're always looking for those opportunities and the kind of funding that can do those things.
Good. Okay, okay, I think that exhausts this portion of the agenda. We'll go on to the next one, which is the School Facilities Committee, which we've discussed in the past, and we committed to having a discussion and review of the School Facilities Committee, and to review a charge for that so that that committee can get going. And I see Alan Mayer is here from the chairperson of the school committee, and with that, I'll turn the microphone over to Alan.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everyone, for having us here. Chris, could you let Craig McClellan into the meeting, please?
Yep, all set.
Thank you. Craig, are you there? Oh, I see him. So in your packet would be our draft of our school facilities committee charge, excuse me. I don't want to.
That could be, excuse me, Ellen, if
Yep.
that charge could be put up on the screen so we could share it then.
And so I don't necessarily want to read through it and take your time doing that. Craig, did you have any overview comments maybe you wanted to make? I don't hear Craig. No, Craig's in the comment. Craig's in the meeting.
I see.
Oh, he says his mic
I see
isn't
Craig
working.
Cullen. Craig
I'm
is Cullen is here and his microphone is on. So, Craig, can you hear us? He's here and his microphone is on.
If you want, if sometimes if he just wants to log out and log back in, we can jump up. Sometimes it just has to get reconnected.
Okay.
Craig, I'll jump you right back in.
While we're waiting for that, this was reviewed and approved by the school committee. Ellen, you want to comment on that?
Yes, it was.
Well,
We discussed it last week at our meeting, and pursuant to the conversation we had with you at your meeting prior to our meeting last week, this is what we've come up with based on the bylaw that the town already has. And the goals were voted and adopted on June the 17th. So the basic charges, the school facilities committee will serve at the direction of the Cohasset School Committee and work with the superintendent of schools, town manager, and other town personnel committees and consultants to advance the goals of the Cohasset School Committee relative to the addition, renovation, and/or construction of new school facilities in the district. School Facilities Committee will provide updates to the Cohasset School Committee and the Board of Selectmen as requested, but not less than once a month.
Sorry, Ellen, to interrupt you. Can you guys hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you, Craig.
All right, great. Sorry about that. I was having computer problems. I had to log back in.
That's okay. So I just read the first charge, and I think we'll entertain questions if anyone has questions.
Okay, can I see the screen of participants? Any questions on this charge? I think, and just to sort of frame this, the bylaws has the actual construction of the committee. We've already put out and made that part of our regular committee appointments. So that process of appointing those members, I think is 9 of them, is going on now. But this would be the charge, which would be reviewed with potential applicants and so forth. So that's sort of the framing of it. And Paul Schubert has a comment.
So on the third goal there, you may be limited on the location when you describe it as locus. I would change that to loci, so that there's definitely more than one location of the town school departments, school facilities, so that if you do want to look for other locations, then you can put in loci and make it more
Okay.
easily workable.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments on this charge? Okay, I don't see any other comments, and I don't see anything from the public. So I think what we could do is take a motion that would accept the charge as presented with the adaptation that Paul Schubert mentioned. Jack Creighton.
Yeah, I'd like to make the motion that we accept the school facilities committee. How do we describe that?
Charge.
The charge with the insertion of the word loci.
Second.
Okay. Yeah, there's a second. Motion's made and the motion seconded. We'll do a roll call vote on that. Diane Kennedy,
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Schubert. Paul Schubert,
Paul Schubert, aye.
Carrie Thompson,
Harry Thompson, aye.
Jack Creighton,
Jack Creighton, aye.
Kevin McCarthy, aye. That's unanimous with that slight adaptation, which I believe you can go back, Alan, with your committee and get that endorsed. And we now have a charge for this important committee.
Well done.
We have the committee's structure, and the filling in of it is part of our normal process. So we're off and running on this. Okay.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for your
Thanks.
support.
Thank you
Well
all.
done. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Ellen
you.
and Craig.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a
Ellen
good
and
night.
Craig,
I'll
have
be
a
back.
great night.
I'll be back for the bill paying at the couple of agenda items going forward.
In this, okay. All right. Next item on the agenda is the town manager update.
So
Mr.
I just,
Senior.
yeah, thank you, Kevin. I'm just going to take this moment to, since you're officially leaving the board, I just want to thank you. It's been a privilege to serve with you these last 6 years. You've been I've gotten to work with you twice as chair. And in fact, I remember our first meeting was at the MMA during my first week, I think, here. And we were all, we went to a bar across the street afterwards. And we all got Guinness glasses, which I still have.
That's right.
And
That's
that was
right.
actually, I think, our first introduction, because you were on the governance committee. And
That's right.
so I want to thank you for all the support and guidance and direction you've given me, helping me adjust to Cohasset, learn the ropes here, and to be a true partner. And I thank you very much for all your service for myself and also for the town as a whole. So thank you very much, Kevin.
Thank you very much for those nice words, Chris. Appreciate that. Okay, we can now go into selectmen comments. Diane Kennedy.
I would just like to echo what Chris said. Kevin, thank you for your 6 years on the select board and the years that you put in on the governance committee prior to that. It's been a pleasure, and I don't know that there's anybody that cares as deeply about doing the right thing for the community as you do, and it's been a real pleasure. So I look forward to seeing how you next materialize, because I am sure you're not running away.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Diane. Much appreciated. Paul Schubert.
So this is neither the end nor the beginning, nor is it the beginning of the end.
Winston Churchill.
I'm gonna miss the Churchill fan and the literary allusions that are gonna be missed. Someone's gonna have to pick up the banner here. Thank you so much for spending 6 years and years before that working with the town, tirelessly doing what's best for the town, doing what's right for the town. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and there'll be a Guinness at Dooley's when it's open for real, I guarantee you.
I'll be there. Thank you.
You already have a bottle of a little bit of pear that I think will help.
A great wine, yeah.
But congratulations and well done.
Thank you very much, Paul. Appreciate that. Carrie Thompson.
Oh, you all are
I
making
didn't
me
expect
emotional.
Me too. I didn't expect this.
Crying now. Oh, Kev, again, to echo what the three of them just said, when I first moved to the South Shore, you were the first one to welcome me here. And you were the first one to welcome me into South Shore politics. And I would not be here sitting in this seat without you, Kev. So thank you for all of your hard work. Thank you for your voice. And I can't wait to see what you do next and how we change the world next. And congrats on all of your success being on the board.
Thank you very much, Carrie. Very much appreciated. Right. Well, okay, Jack. Jack,
Now,
well,
listen, yeah. Well, now, Kevin, don't get, anyway, you epitomize just the best that we have in Cohasset. Your understanding of government, your absolutely unquestioned integrity. You're an example. You're kind of like, I guess, Mr. Cohasset. But if you are Mr. Cohasset, we have this great historian, Jackie Dormansour, who's written a book.
Oh,
And if I was more tech savvy, everybody could read this, but I guess it looks, but anyway, it's her narrative history of Cohasset. And as I can read, from the select board to Kevin McCarthy, thank you for your service to the town, 23 June 2020. And then it is personally signed on the signature page, which again is backwards, Jackie Dormansour. So write new
that's very
chapters
nice.
in Cohasset. You've written a wonderful chapter in Cohasset, Kevin, and thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you very much. It's wonderful. I will enjoy that book very much, and I very much appreciate that. And what can I say to top all of that? I do want to say that this year as chair, we had a tumultuous year, and I can do nothing but thank all four of my fellow board members. You've all been really cooperative to me personally, even before the crisis occurred. You've really been very helpful and supportive of me as chair, as all of you, I hope, get to be chair at some point. You realize that, it is quite a lot of work and it takes a lot. And you hopefully that you'll be as lucky as I have been to have the four selectmen that I've had, that all of you, every one of you has always supported me. And I've needed that support, and I appreciate that. Chris, what can I say? 6 years, I mean, I'm not sure what I'm going to do, because most people don't know that for 6 years, most of the time Chris has been here, and all the time I was board, Chris and I have met just about every 2 weeks, generally to go over to the agenda. The first 2 or 3 years, he patiently sat there while I asked him question after question. I don't know if you remember those times, Chris. I'm sure you do. And he has helped make me a much better political servant to this community. He's helped me make a much better person. So, Chris, thank you very much. I also want to thank all of the select people that I have served in the last 6 years. I've been on a board with some very distinguished citizens, some very bright and dedicated people. I can say nothing but thank you to all of the select people that I've had an opportunity to work with. You've made, you're just terrifically admirable people, and I much appreciate it. As far as our administration goes, our fire, our police, our public health, our DPW, I mean, what a town we have. I mean, what a town we have. To see us work under the pressure, which I've seen through the snowstorms and the outages, and now the COVID crisis, I'm telling you, other towns look at us with envy, and what a pleasure to work with these dedicated, brilliant, creative professionals, and every one of them loves this town so much. I appreciate it. And all the citizens that have elected me twice and continue to be polite and supportive of me, and I very much thank all of you. The town is so lucky to have citizens that keep it going through its committees and so forth as it has. And finally, Tracy, I know that you're there somewhere in cyberspace as always. What a fortunate thing I have had to have you be our assistant and my assistant as during chair and as a selectman. And so Tracy, you're the best. Thank you very, very much. I could go on, but I've said enough. I think you get a rough idea of how I feel. Chief Sylvia, did you want to say anything before we all end up in tears here?
Mr. Chairman, I know this is completely out of line to pop back in at the very end of a meeting, but that being said, I'm notorious for doing these things. So as the senior member of the staff in Cohasset, and I can say that, I think, at this point, with my almost 41 years at this, I really want to, from everybody, I want to say thank you for everything you've done for the last 6 years. We know your heart's always been in the right place. You've always had the back of all of the town staff, and we all appreciate you for everything you've done for the last 6 years. And on a personal note, I want to thank you for the last 100 and something days. We're going through something that has never in our lifetimes been seen, this pandemic, and your leadership and your support of all of us on a daily, almost hourly basis is greatly appreciated. So please accept the thanks from all the town staff and especially from me. Job well done, my friend.
Thank you very much, sir, and I accept that with great humility. Thank you very much. Thank you, folks. Very much appreciate all those comments. Okay, we'll now move on to the next item on the agenda, minutes, the 5/26/20 meeting. And do I have a motion to approve them?
I move to approve the minutes from 5/26/2020.
Second.
Second.
Okay, do a roll call vote. Diane?
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Schubert, aye.
Carrie Thompson, aye.
Jack Creighton, aye.
Kevin McCarthy, aye. That's unanimously approved. Okay, we don't generally have these, but we do have a topic that's not reasonably as anticipated that has arisen in the last 48 hours, and that's a local option regarding the approval of payments on contracts for educational services. And the times that we're in, we need to be flexible about, considering these needs as they've arisen. So with that, I see Don Piet and Michael McMillan have appeared on the screen. So why don't I turn the microphone over to Don to lead this
Right, thank
discussion.
you, Kevin. So I'm going to just give a brief overview of what we're looking at here. And I asked Michael, he offered to be here to provide some additional notes and explanations on what we're doing. So once the COVID pandemic hit, as we know, a lot of at-home learning occurred, and related to special education services, specifically transportation, we were no longer essentially receiving these services since middle of March. The DESC at one point had recommended that towns and cities continue to pay these contracts, at least on a modified basis for continuity of service, to be able to allow us to maintain these services in the future. However, the DOR and Mass General Law did not have anything written about this yet. Mass law, we cannot make any payments on invoices or contracts without those goods and services rendered. So long story short, the state legislature passed an act relative to municipal governance during COVID emergency. And now this is allowing us to pay these invoices from March through June, and only through the end of this fiscal year, to allow this continuity and to be able to make these payments. Now, Michael has gone through and reached out to each vendor and has negotiated a contract based on more fixed costs, which I'll let him explain that in a minute. But what we're here today to ask you is your approval. So part of this bulletin related to this act is that it requires a three-part approval. Approval by the Board of Selectmen, by the accountant, myself, and then the school committee. So based on my discussions with Michael, their school finance subcommittee is aware of this and is in favor. The school committee will be voting on this at their next meeting for approval. And because we only have a few weeks left in the year end, this is why we're kind of coming to you last minute to get this in front of you to approve. Once we have the approvals, we're also waiting on a requirement of a sworn statement from each vendor, essentially stating that they did not receive any state, local, federal assistance to keep them operational. And if so, they would be reducing the contract amount by any amount that they received, and that's what we would pay essentially as a net amount. So basically, I sent Chris a summary of the bills that we would like to pay, the original contract amounts for these last 3 months, and the renegotiated amounts. And you can see the work Michael did reduce what we are paying by almost $70,000, which is great. Again, I think more based on fixed costs, and he can explain that a little bit more on the process he went through. you don't mind, Michael?
Yeah, thanks, Don. So, I mean, I've negotiated with each individual vendor, kind of looking at their fixed cost, excuse me, and, you know, trying to arrive at an amount which reflects their particular circumstances and also the service they provide to us and how we arrived at their original rate. So it's not, you know, there isn't a, you know, it's not been consistent like percentage or anything because we've kind of worked with each one, and also sharing information with other districts to see how their negotiations are going, really to come at a number which seemed reasonable to both ourselves and to the vendor. And really, this is about, as Dawn suggested, really that many of these vendors provide, particularly ones providing out district services, so that's transporting students to out district locations. They're really critical for us. We had entered into agreements with them for annual services, and obviously we weren't able to use them, but they'd still invested in that, to be able to provide that service. And so, you know, we've come up with a price that we think is reasonable to pay them in order to see them through to the end of it, well, finish out this year before we go into next year. And this is in line, as Dawn mentioned, this is in line now with the advice from Department for Education and from even, you know, Federal CARES Act and so on, is to continue paying vendors, you know, if not a full amount, a modified amount.
Okay, and these amounts are were budgeted anyways, right?
Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
So they're in the budget, and it's a question of paying them at these reduced rates is really, and the idea of doing that is to make sure we support these organizations so we have continuity of service when we go on the forward. And we've got the backstop of the fact that they may have gotten federal or state funds, which would even lower these figures more. I got that correct?
Yes, perfect.
That is correct.
I just summarized it for everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Very good job.
Yeah.
Any discussion? Okay, I take a motion then to approve these fund allocations as requested.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Roll call vote. Diane Kennedy.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul
Schubert,
Schubert.
aye.
Carrie Thompson.
Carrie Thompson, aye.
Jack Creighton.
Jack Creighton, aye.
Kevin McCarthy, aye. Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you for your presentation. I'm glad to do it, okay?
Great.
Yeah,
Thank you, everybody.
appreciate it. Good to see you, Michael. Good to see you, Don, okay? And Ellen, as always, good to see you. Okay, that ends our agenda. The next would be adjournment. I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do we don't want? We don't want to adjourn?
No,
I
we'll
know,
never
it's
adjourn
kind
on
of
you, Kevin.
bittersweet.
Never,
No, we don't want to.
Bittersweet.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Diane?
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul
Paul
Schubert?
Schubert, aye.
Carrie Thompson?
Carrie Thompson, aye.
Kevin, Jack Creighton?
You know, Kevin, I'm not voting aye. I'm voting nay. We do not adjourn on Kevin McCarthy. I'm outvoted, I know, but nay.
All right, I'll say aye. That passes Tracy 4-1. And with that, this meeting is now adjourned. Good night. Thank you, everybody. Have a great week. Take care.
We love you, Kev.
Bye-bye,
Yeah.
everybody. Bye-bye.
That was a
Hip,
brave
hip,
vote,
hooray,
Jack.
hip, hip, hooray. Hoorah, hoorah.